What is up, everybody? I'm Vish Kumaran, joined by Jessie Naylor and Larry Krueger for our weekly Thursday show that disrupts everybody's Thursday night football schedule. What's up, guys? Jessie, I see you there down below. No Niners shirt, no Niners hat today. What is going on? No outward display of fandom. Did you want to join me in kind of a more beige and glum?
Yeah, at least I've got something on my walls or behind me, Vish. I mean, come on.
We're going straight there.
Okay, yeah. I'm just taking a shot right away.
Seriously, Vish could be in home arrest somewhere. You know what I mean? I mean, Vish could be locked up. Probably not.
I moved away from the white walls with the weird door that had an outward-facing handle inside of my house that was just the place to the furnace. But look at you, Larry. You got Christmas green to complement the Niner red behind you. You ready for the holidays?
I'm feeling very, very good. Yes, I'm feeling very good.
Hey,
Vish, hold on. Vish literally adds a gray wall and an oscillating fan behind him, and it's like, no, now we've got decorations.
It's beautiful. It's looking beautiful, Krug. I do gotta ask you, did you see the picture on the thumbnail?
No, but where is it? Did you send it to me?
No, I didn't send it to you, but you know what picture I used.
I know what picture he used.
I know what picture you used. That damn Warrior jersey.
You look good, Krug.
Some people say that I look like sausage casing. Basically there. But what can I say? I took the picture. I gladly took that size medium and said, I'm putting this bad boy on. And that's how good I was feeling about myself at that point in history.
Wow.
So I would allow that to go viral.
So while I stop messing with the fan behind me, just to show people that it's not there just for show, it actually works. One person on this panel, and his name is Jessie Naylor, had a very interesting take that I wanted to talk about first with you guys. He saw something on the 49 Hours, which, by the way, the 49ers killed it this week with the production. I felt like I was back in 2019 watching that. I've watched it already 2 times over. It was so fun to watch. You watched that, Jessie, and you felt like you saw something that made you think that this is why you feel like the 49ers are Super Bowl bound. Care to elaborate? And let's start there. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, shout out to the 49ers. Finally, I don't know how much crap I've talked on Twitter about them and their lack of fun things that they do. Their schedule release is always awful. I feel like I don't know who their graphic designers are or who comes up with these things, but it's been terrible. Not this year. 49 Hours is a must watch if you've not seen it. The 49ers are doing a much better job with their production, putting things out there for the fans to bring them in. And I love to see it. So definitely go check that out. It gives you a lot of cool angle looks throughout the game and some of the behind the scenes stuff. So very cool product that they've put out there. But at the very end of that video, Brock Purdy breaks down the 49ers in the locker room, and then Kyle Shanahan comes up and gives him like an awkward shoulder rub, half bro hug thing.
Right, I saw it.
But for me, that was massive. I know we've seen pictures of them in the locker room, and it definitely does seem like Kyle Shanahan really likes Brock Purdy, really does love working with him, loves the relationship. But when you actually physically see it in a video, it was a whole different thing for me. And to me, I've talked all offseason about what the 49ers needed to do for Brock Purdy. One of them was get rid of Trey Lance. Check the box there. The other one was make him a captain. Check the box there. And then the last one was Shanahan has to show confidence in him week in and week out. I'm seeing that. I don't know that I've seen Kyle Shanahan or heard Kyle Shanahan other than maybe Kirk Cousins, which he really wasn't around that much. He just talks about him, even though he's been on other teams, really promote and show genuine love for. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, these are athletes. They're not fragile, but they're people. And a lot of people think, oh, because there's an M next to the dollar signs there that they make, or that they are on TV week in and week out, that they aren't human beings. And listen, my football takes are not always going to be right. That's impossible. But one thing I do know is leadership. And I've spent a lot of time in it. And I'm very confident that I know leadership inside and out. I'm very confident that I know who Kyle Shanahan has been as a leader. And I'm very confident that I know his shortcomings. I'm seeing something different in Kyle Shanahan and the way that he's interacting with Brock Purdy that I've seen from any of the quarterbacks since he has been here. And the way that I've heard him handle quarterbacks in the past. This is something special. It seems small, but I think it is a massive deal and might be the difference in why the 49ers can win a Super Bowl. Giving Brock Purdy that confidence week in and week out, I think it's a big deal, man. I think it's a really, really big deal.
What do you think, Krug?
Well, I totally agree.
That's your guy.
Yeah, I mean, can I share the screen here? I don't know if I can on my. If I did I just share?
If you do,
I can
remove the overlay. Yeah, remove the overlay.
Let me remove it. Look at this.
Can you
look at this production quality on this show? Look at us.
Okay, so I'm going to share this. This is a question that I asked. I asked Kyle Shanahan, and this was about the strip sack the other day by TJ Watt.
Mm-hmm.
And then he came over to the sideline, and my kid made it into a video. I want to play this. I don't know if I can do this. Let me see if I can do this right. Here we go. Tell me if you can hear this.
Calling the strip sack.
Yeah, I can hear
TJ Watt. After that play, you came back to the bench and looked like imparted something to Brock. It kind of looked like a one-way conversation. Do you remember what you shared with him right there?
Yeah, just coaching on when we don't get what we expect. And we did get what the second thing we expect. It was just taking too long. And Brock was waiting on it. He saw it all right. And could have been a big play. We just didn't have the time for it. And I told Brock, dude, my last thing I want to do is put you in that situation. I thought we'd be able to get rid of it quicker. But when you can't wait on it for that long. Sometimes you just got to tuck it away and take the sack because we didn't have time to wait on the look.
There you go. So that was just, I'll stop sharing there. But that was, to me, it's like you can always grade these relationships, guys, when things are going good. But I mean, it's always about what happens when the S hits the fan. And that was the S hits the fan moment of week one, the strip sack. Watt beats McKivitz, takes away the ball. Niners lose possession. The quarterback gets sacked. I'm sure and Kyle at that point went over and basically imparted, some advice to Brock. And you can judge by the look of on his face. He was pretty pointed, and I'm sure how he described that. Well, my point in bringing that up and to show you that is that Brock Purdy's totally fine with that. I mean, I don't know if he welcomes it, but you know what I mean? He's not going to shrink in that moment with his head coach being critical of a situation that maybe he had only, a little to do with, as opposed to it's all your fault. And I think that's a good sign to me that the relationship is going to remain intact. And that's what these things are. They're relationships, right? And it's a key relationship on the 49ers is the head coach and the offensive coordinator and the quarterback. And that's what Kyle, he wears both hats. So I agree with Jesse. I think several of the boxes that you need to see checked between quarterback and head coach have been checked.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think it's very clear that Kyle has a different level of love for Brock Purdy, and you can see it in the way he talks about him. We all asked him to talk about Trey Lance. We requested him to talk about Jimmy Garoppolo. He never did that the way he talks about Brock Purdy, so that part is clear. To me, there's also an opposite impact that I wanted to touch on with the two of you, because I thought we really saw it when they were playing with the lead in that second half of the Steelers game. I think Brock Purdy has something that he brings to Kyle Shanahan as well. Brock Purdy has great poise that he maintains throughout the game, regardless of the moment. And he also has very, very good game awareness for where he is, what the score is, and what needs to be done at that point, where the clock is, and how to do all of those kinds of things. His game management is very, very astute. I mean, we saw that when he played early with him being aware of where the first down was and not taking the hit with the oblique/ribs injury at Seattle. Then we saw other glimpses of that. Larry, you always point to it early in preseason when he was snapping the ball at 2 and 3 seconds versus the Vikings all the way back when. I think we saw those things even against the Steelers, and I think those are good for Kyle Shanahan. We saw Shanahan have a much more natural sequencing to his play calling because he felt so comfortable with how the game was going. He felt comfortable with how his quarterback was playing, and he felt comfortable in that moment where we didn't see any calls that felt forced, like they were trying to make something happen. Everything felt so natural with the sequencing of the game. And I think what Purdy specifically brings to Shanahan is that poise in terms of managing the game in those kinds of situations. Like even when they were playing with the lead against Pittsburgh, they were snapping the ball at the end of the clock. Purdy had a great awareness of when to run, when to throw. He was converting run. He converted that 3rd and 12 with a really, really good run. And so I want your thoughts on this, but I think we talk so much about Shanahan's impact on Purdy, and that's impossible to miss because of what this offense does, the way it opens up things, the way it allows Purdy to function with his physical skill set. But I do think there's, with Purdy's awareness and his poise and his game awareness, I do think that there is a positive impact that he is having on Shanahan, where a guy like Garoppolo felt like he didn't have an awareness beyond what was happening and beyond what Shanahan was telling him. And Purdy seems to have something a little bit more there. What do you guys think, Jesse? I'll start with you.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, the relationship has to be earned, and Kyle Shanahan is a very tough critic. Obviously, Brock Purdy has done something to earn the relationship. I don't want to take anything away from that, because that much is clear. You know, he's gone out there, done what he's needed to do to earn that relationship. I just know how important that relationship is between quarterback and coach, especially if that head coach is the offensive play caller as well. And I've heard Brock Purdy in the past talk about how important that relationship was to his success at Iowa State. And you saw the way the final game at Iowa State, the way that he embraced the coach there. I mean, it was a big deal. Who's the coach? Is it
Matt Campbell.
Matt Campbell. Yeah, Matt Campbell. The way he and Matt Campbell embraced, there was legitimate love between those two. Kyle Shanahan's never given that. So there's something that Brock Purdy's done to earn it, which is great. And Kyle is opening up and showing it. It's a big deal. And again, like I said, a lot of people are like, well, you know, these are professionals. Like, who cares? It matters. It's a big deal because Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't come out and say the things that he said this offseason if he didn't feel jaded towards Kyle Shanahan and the way that relationship never really truly meshed together, probably the way that he needed it to feel like Kyle Shanahan was confident in him. You wouldn't see Trey Lance liking tweets the way he has since he's been traded if he felt like the relationship.
Were there more likes?
There's been a few. Yeah, there's been a few.
Oh, okay. I was
so
not aware.
you wouldn't see those things. And I'm not saying, listen, I'm not saying that they earned those things or who's at fault or whatever. I'm just simply saying that right now, Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan are lockstep. Now, I'm also not saying that this will last forever. Everything's been great. Larry, you talked about the relationship and when the chips are down, what does that look like? Yeah, I mean, the chips were down on a play when they were up big, but they haven't lost yet with CMC and Brock Purdy and this cast of characters. What happens when they do lose? What happens if they lose a playoff game? Like, what starts to happen to the relationship? But, and I can't predict that, but I do feel like the foundation of this relationship is in a much better spot than it's ever been with any quarterback. I would imagine that it would stand strong through those situations. But frankly, we haven't seen it, so I can't say that for sure. I also know that Kyle Shanahan is very quick to change his mind. So hopefully that is not the case here.
You know, I just think, if you go down and, you're never going to get the straight answer on this. But if the Kyle Shanahan playbook, let's just say for the sake of discussion, it's this thick, right? Well, what percentage of this playbook did he feel totally comfortable with in the biggest moments putting in the hands of Jimmy Garoppolo? Probably more like this, right? And if you ask the question, what part of this playbook did he feel that Trey Lance could operate? It was probably more like this. I think what we're talking about and this is terrible commentary if you're watching this or listening to this only in Spotify or Apple. But I'm basically making the playbook smaller with my hand. My point is, I think with Brock Purdy, the playbook is this big, and he can use this size playbook with him, and he can utilize almost everything. Let's just say if it's this, maybe with Brock, it's like this, because there's certain downfield throws maybe he wouldn't have Brock make, that maybe he might have had Matt Ryan make at some point, or maybe he would have had Trey Lance make at some point. But my point is just to say that I think Brock gives him the most the highest percentage of his total playbook that he feels comfortable using. And let's be honest too, Jimmy's a cool guy. Like, Jimmy's a cool guy that everybody likes, but I don't know that he's an A student. I think he's kind of the cool guy that everybody likes, that was kind of more like a gifted C+, B- student. Like, he was smart enough to do it and get by, but you know what? At the end of the day,
he lasted in my house.
He didn't work super hard. You couldn't find him in the off season. How dedicated was he to every little change? And but it doesn't mean that the guys didn't dig him. The guys did dig him, but you know what I mean? He wasn't like the greatest student. Brock Purdy, I think, is that guy that's kind of like that A student. He goes to bed early. He shows up in class. He sits in the first row. He knows the entire game plan. I think he's a little bit all in on football, and more football, like a coach. And that's why you never get these answers, by the way, straight out from Kyle Shanahan.
No.
Didn't matter if you asked him in a private moment or a public moment. He's going to keep a lot of these secrets close to the vest. But I feel like I've got a good sense of the whole thing. And I just feel that he just feels like Brock is a lot more like a coach, and that he's got the full width of his playbook.
But you brought up Matt Ryan, and I'm glad that you did, because even with Matt Ryan, that relationship wasn't like this. There's a story where Matt Ryan talked about it, that after that first season together, he and Shanahan not at all on the same page. And in fact, it was Matt Ryan, not Kyle Shanahan, who reached out in the offseason and said, hey, let's go grab a beer. We got to hash this thing out. Like, this isn't working. And he being a veteran quarterback and Kyle not being the head coach had the cachet to be able to do that. And Jimmy Garoppolo never had that cachet. Trey Lance didn't have that cachet. RG3 didn't have that cachet because dad was head coach.
Right.
Like,
Matt
not
Ryan
many
was a Pro
quarterback
Bowler before he even
exactly.
was with Shanahan.
So he had the cachet, and like I said, he wasn't the head coach, so that he gave him even more. But the point is that even in Matt Ryan, who was established and a Pro Bowler before Shanahan, and eventually went on to win an MVP and go to a Super Bowl with Shanahan, that relationship wasn't as strong as what we're seeing here with Brock Purdy. And I mean, there's something to that to me.
So I think you both are right in a way, but I think there's also something you missed in week one, and I'm just going to mention that. We're going to then get to the Rams. Shout out to Eric Nelson. He says, you three are the best of Niners news. I mean, Eric, you said it, not us, so we'll just pat ourselves on the back.
What about,
really appreciate it.
Not a funny
the
joke.
one thing, so one of the things that you guys know, because I was very, very loud about it on shows with both of you, Kyle Shanahan isn't good week one, right? I kept beating that drum. I looked like an idiot on Sunday after what they did. But we got an explanation from Chris Sims, his best friend, this week on Pro Football Talk that gave us a little bit of it illuminated a little bit why Shanahan has been poor week one. He says Shanahan doesn't like coaching week one because of how unpredictable it is. He likes to know what defenses are going to do to him so that he can have game plan specific things to attack defenses. Week one, it kind of turns into a situation of they kind of just run their offense. Yes, they have some things planned for that defense, but they're not 100% sure how they're going to play them. And you kind of just see how it plays out, talent versus talent. And if you look at Shanahan's history week one, you look at how the Niners have looked week one, that makes a lot of sense. Now, the football team played an extremely high level, but the one thing we saw with Brock Purdy that was different, which goes to Larry's this comparison, whatever that was, his little alligator of the playbook. What did they do on offense, right? They didn't have a misdirection run play to get an explosive, to spark a drive, or Shanahan just has something where it's a play action, they set something up, and a guy is just butt naked, wide open, and all the quarterback has to do is hit him. It wasn't like that at all versus Pittsburgh. They just ran their offense. They did what they do running the football. They ran their normal pass plays, and they just executed them as an offense at such a high level. And that's where I think Purdy is making a bit of a difference, right? We've seen early with Trey Lance a few game-specific plays to get Tyler Kroft open and stuff like that so that they can manufacture explosives. We saw a similar thing with Garoppolo, especially when you look at the week 1 game in 2018 versus the Vikings. I mean, to me, that was the game that like really exemplified how Shanahan was out on Garoppolo. If we look back on all of it, because of the number of plays he really missed on that game. And then you look at how scared he played the next week against the Lions, you can see a clear delineation to me of that then. But you look at just how the game was called with Purdy. They didn't do anything out of the realm of what they do. They ran their usual run plays. They ran their usual pass plays. It was just sequenced so beautifully. It felt so natural. And that's because the quarterback executed in ways that the quarterback hasn't in the past. And I think that's where they're smitten with Purdy right now. Jesse, I do think you are right. We do need to see them go through a little bit of a negative with Purdy. Ideally, it doesn't come in a way that affects their season, but they haven't had to go through, they've only had peaks with Purdy. They haven't had to go through any valleys, and those will come because it's just life in the NFL, and that's just what happens. But overall, absolutely, I agree with both of you that it's clear Shanahan is smitten. It's clear Lynch is smitten. And Larry, I don't want to pat ourselves on the back, but you and I did a show after the Combine presser in February, and we said it's clear that those guys are smitten with Brock Purdy. I don't want to pat you on the back extra or gas your head up a little bit more than me because you've been saying that maybe even longer than me, but I want to include myself with you in this. But it's very, very clear they're smitten there, and he's going to be their quarterback at least for the foreseeable future, barring anything catastrophic happening. Jesse, do you have anything to say before we jump to the
I just
Rams?
wanted to add in that, it's interesting because they didn't run anything other than the normal playbook, but CMC has brought an element to this team as well that can't be ignored. That these receivers are getting wide open regardless of whether they're trying to scheme it or not. And a lot of that is Brandon Ayuk is a hell of a route runner, but a lot of that is also there's so much focus on CMC that it's allowing them to get these one-on-one matchups that Shanahan doesn't have to do anything amazing to get him open. I mean, even
That's true.
And this isn't a Brock Purdy or anything. This was a Jimmy Garoppolo thing too. Like these guys were getting wide open. The average yards of separation were 1 and 2 in the league with Jimmy Garoppolo and Brock Purdy last year. And you saw it a lot again this year. Now, again, Brock Purdy played a hell of a game as well. I mean, it's interesting because going into the game, last week when we talked expectations of Brock Purdy. And I said, I just want to see more of the same. That's all I want to see week 1. Like throughout the season, of course, I want to see him improve. But to me, he didn't have an off season to improve. He had an off season to overcome his injury and try to get healthy. So if he could just be right back where he was, I think that's good enough to win a ton of games. And then throughout the season, he can build on that. And to me, I was elated after the game, went on the post game. I'm like, Brock Purdy was excellent. It was great. And I'm not saying it was excellent because he just blew everything out of the water. And oh my gosh, I saw things that I hadn't seen, but it was excellent in the standpoint that he is exactly who he was last year. And if that's the starting point and we're going to get ascension, I mean, the 49ers are in a really good spot to potentially win a Super Bowl this year. And now he's got a head coach that is fully bought in as well. There's so much confidence that he already plays with because that's just who he is. But then there's so much confidence in the head coach to call the plays and then also say, hey, listen, you know what? Bad things happen, but it was my bad. I mean, they're just in a really, really good spot right now. And this team just might win a Super Bowl because of it.
I 100% agree with that, Jesse. Krug, I hate to cut you off, but I want to get your take on the Niners on the upcoming week versus the Rams, as I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Before that, this is specific to you, Krug. Front Row Justice wants to Appreciate the donation. He says, Larry, what question was asked when Brock Purdy said, I don't want to compare myself to Mahomes? Also, is Brock Purdy a top 10 quarterback? Gets close when you get to 8 to 10, in my opinion.
I think he's a very good quarterback. Rankings are difficult because these are all moving targets. Some guys, it's funny watching the Eagles and the Vikings tonight. There are weeks that people think Kirk Cousins is a top tier guy, and there's weeks they think he's a bottom tier guy. He's got a lot of fluidity, let's say, in a lot of the rankings. I don't remember that question, by the way, where he says, I don't want to compare myself to Mahomes. I was at the presser today. Purdy walked in, guys, wearing an Iowa Hawkeye hat. Or
it was a helmet, yeah.
Helmet, yeah, because Iowa State lost to Iowa last week in the Battle of Iowa, and George Kittle and him had a bet.
I know, one of the worst college football games of the weekend, by the way. That was an awful watch. It was like 20 to 13.
But I don't know. I don't know the answer to this one. I forget the question, which one it was, where he says, I don't want to compare myself to Mahomes. But I think the Niners right now feel really good about Brock Purdy. I mean, think about this, guys. I mean, we talked a lot about the quarterbacks, and I know people are like, hey, you guys have over-talked the quarterback. But, I mean, take this aside and take the Niners, put them aside. I don't care if this is the Tennessee Titans. This is an amazing freaking story. This guy was the last pick in the draft. Not only did you have a quarterback on the roster who had been to the Super Bowl with the team, you also had the team invest a significant amount of draft capital in the future in Trey Lance, and they both are out of there. And Mr. Irrelevant is standing, and he's breaking down the team in the locker room in Pittsburgh. And every guy to a man is just got ridiculous glowing things to say about the guy. He seems to be a perfect fit for the Shanahan offense. You can't ask any of his receivers on or off the record anything about the guy and get anything but just, they love him. Why? Because he's humble and he's thoroughly competent and he's a great competitor, and they'll just take their chances with the rest. But those three traits, humble and being such an awesome competitor and being competent at your job, the ball comes out on time with accuracy. There's guys on offense, guys on defense, coaches, they all feel the same way about this guy. It's like those boxes weren't any of the boxes that people will really talk about, but those are the ones that matter once the season gets going and it's time to win games.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's somewhat irrelevant at this point where he ranks, just because week to week, you're just going to see one guy play well and everybody's going to be, calling him the greatest player ever. And then the next week he's going to play poorly and they're going to say, get him out of the league, right? People are already questioning Josh Allen and Joe Burrow after they have two excellent seasons and they have one bad game week one. And it's like, oh, are those guys the same guys? Maybe we were wrong about those guys. All I'll say about Purdy is I think what Jesse said was spot on about him being the same guy. And I don't think people realize what a big deal it is for him to be the same guy. Not only was he recovering from a serious injury this entire offseason, and he spent the entire offseason rehabbing, but there was a different expectation on the player too. And we've seen players come back when they're a different expectation to not be the same guy. Larry just touched on it. The story last year was poetic. It was Cinderella. It was 7th round pick. He became the starter and all of that. This offseason, it wasn't that. This offseason, they didn't care that he was Mr. Irrelevant. Now he was the franchise quarterback of the 49ers. He had to do media obligations that way. He took all the first team reps when he practiced. He did everything as the franchise quarterback of the 49ers, and we saw no change in the guy. We saw no change in the guy on the field, and we saw no change on the guy from the guy off the field. To me, that's impressive. I do want to touch on the Niners versus the Rams. I think it's a more interesting matchup than we originally thought, just because we saw how well coached the Rams are against the Seahawks. Before we do, Jeremy Price says, "What up, y'all? Jess, I forgive you for working with the ops. F the cowgirls. Vish, you're not off the chain. Don't pick against the gang. F the analytics." All right, appreciate it, Jeremy.
Oh, it's because I do my weekly Behind Enemy Lines show, I think is where he's talking about. That's funny.
You're talking to the enemy? No.
Every week I
was telling Grant today in the media room right before Wilkes came in. I'm like, man, Jesse's out of town show is a lot of fun. I did my own stream with Kev last night, a little call stream, but I watched your, out of town behind enemy lines. And I dig that. I think that's a very cool angle, I think, for content creators. Cause let's be honest, guys, we talk to each other and we talk about the Niners a lot.
Yep.
It is kind of cool to like take like an hour-long break and just be like, hey, let's do the deep dive on the opponent. If nothing else, it's, variety is the spice of life, right?
All right,
Yeah,
let's
I
do
mean,
that
it's
then.
nice
Go
too.
ahead.
Well, I was just saying
And you
it's
learn
nice
something.
because you learn something. And there was so many players that we talked about that, especially the Rams, they're in a situation where they've got a lot of young up and coming players. And by the end of the conversation, I told him this. I said, I think the Rams this year might be the Seahawks of last year. Meaning last year, the Seahawks snuck up on everybody. Everybody expected a 5-win season or worse. And what you saw happen was great coach, quarterback that was playing well, and a team that ascended throughout the year. Let's also not forget that they won a game that they were not supposed to in week 1. In week 2, much like the Rams, they played the 49ers. They got mollywopped. Chances are that's probably going to happen to the Rams. But the Rams have the quarterback. The Rams have the coach. They also have Aaron Donald. And this young team that is probably going to improve as the season goes. They just might be the team out of the West and not Seattle that finds their way into the playoffs. There's a lot of similarities between them and Seattle from last year, in my opinion.
And just to add one thing to that, I think the Rams, we'll talk more about it, but I think the Rams, because I watched the All-22 late last night after my show, after I watched Jessie and the Behind the Enemy Lines, I got into the All-22 of week 1, Rams Seahawks. And guys, the Rams may have sent a wrinkle to the rest of the league that's going to turn off the Geno Smith water. I mean, they rushed him with 3, a lot, and 4, a lot. And they dropped 7 and 8 into coverage and made him be accurate. And he looked utterly baffled by it. So I'm eager to see what the Seahawks look like going forward in the next few weeks, because maybe that's the key. Don't give him defined reads. And a lot of people want to blitz inexperienced quarterbacks. I don't know what he got last year, but my guess is maybe he got a lot of blitz. Well, a lot of blitz, as you guys know well, it gives you defined reads. And if you don't define the read,
blitzed that much last year. I think that it was. Well, I think that
they dropped 8,
little bit,
and he looked
right.
confused.
And I do think it was a little bit of a case of, yes, it hurt Geno as well. Geno did not play well in that football game. But the Seahawks offense didn't have a lot of answers for them dropping 8 and stuff to check the ball down underneath and create those type of opportunities for him either. And we saw how much the Seahawks thrive on their down the field passing game, whether that's with Russell Wilson or with Geno Smith. Now, the one thing with the Rams, I think that you brought up a really good point comparing them to last year's Seahawks, because we saw that they're a really, really well-coached team. And they have a quarterback who, when he's healthy, is pretty special. The throws he was making versus the Seahawks was unbelievable. To me, he had the best game of any quarterback week 1. And I know I'm a Matthew Stafford fan, but I really think that. The issue I have with really projecting this game, just from, let's get into a little Niners-Rams here, is I think some of the throws he made are not even going to be available against this defense. The Rams really, the one thing, Krueg, I don't know if you see this, the one thing the Rams have on even now, even with all of these young players, is they have team speed. They have team speed on offense, and they have team speed on defense. The problem is the Niners are faster than them, the Niners are bigger and stronger than them, and the Niners are more talented than them, and they're just as well coached. To me, it's just a bad matchup. The Rams showed week 1 that they can hang around and compete with the non-Cowboys, Eagles, Niners version of the NFC, where these teams that are not overwhelmingly talented, more talented than them, they have the quarterback and they have the coaching where McVay will control the game. Stafford will make enough big throws and they can compete and win a close game. Or in this case, they blew out the Seahawks in Seattle. But to me, if we look at it from the Niners game, and I think your point about maybe we'll see that this week and we'll see if perhaps that same plan gets applied to Geno Smith, because I do think that's interesting, Larry, for not just Geno, but their offense as a whole. But just looking at the Rams and versus the Niners, to me, again, I know I picked the Niners game wrong and I'm nervous about jinxing them, but to me, this is a game that they're going to steamroll the Rams. I don't see really where the Rams match up or where their advantage is. And even for Stafford to make what he did last week, which was a lot of throws from tight pockets, he also got more time than I expected, but he still made big time throws from tight pockets. I don't expect that even to be a possibility versus the Niners with how well they rush the quarterback and how fast they are in the back end and how much better their coverage is even than Seattle. What do you guys think?
I think there's a path to the Rams winning this game.
You do? Okay,
I
let's
do.
get into it then.
I think Kyron Williams really runs well. Now, they don't have a great line, but he runs hard, and he's small, and he falls forward, and they're committing to the run. They ran it 40 times last week. They didn't run it well, but they ran it a lot. And then Stafford, as you said, one of the best quarterbacks in football when he's healthy, was awesome on third down. They converted 7 of 11. And I don't know, the health issue going into this week is what's the physical status of Puka Nacua, the BYU rookie, because supposedly he's dinged up, did not practice today.
Mm-hmm.
But they have two really, I'll say 3 because I think Higbee's also a decent receiver, but they've got 2 really different wide receivers in Nacua and Atwell. And it's like I asked Steve Wilkes today about it, and he didn't give me too much on the answer, but I basically was saying, look how different Nacua and Atwell are. Nacua, you got to be all over him. You have to be draped all over him because he's got sure hands, great ball skills, not great speed. He'll sit in the soft spot. He'll catch it, and that's it. He's not a run after the catch guy as much as he's just going to catch it. So, Stafford's going to rock it, and that guy gets open. He's got such ball skills. I mean, they threw him 15 balls. He caught 10. Atwell, on the other hand, is like maybe the fastest guy in football, and you have to give him a proper amount of space. Otherwise, he can run by you. You want to get good hits on him, but it's really imperative that you take good angles because this guy is gone. I mean, this guy is like 165 pounds, but he runs, legit 4.3 and maybe sub 4.3. And he's just like really, really, really explosive. So he had 119 yards last week. So to me, it's converting, draped all the coverage has got to be super tight on Higbee, super tight on Nacua if he plays. And then they got to get, to me, it's all about what do you get done on first and second down? If you can get this Rams team into 3rd and 8 or longer, you got them right where you want them. And I think the Niners could win big. But if the Rams get to a lot of 3rd and manageables and 3rd and shorts, I think the Niners run D is going to be tested here.
Yeah, I also think that, there's always a path to victory for technically any team. You never know what can happen. I think that margin of error for them is very slim, but Puka Nacua is really a poor man's JSN, is the way that he was labeled coming out of this draft. And he looked phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal, which is interesting because if you look at, him and Higbee and Tutu, do you like Oliver at nickel against any of these guys if it happens? I certainly don't. So I think that's a path. And then one thing we're seeing from the Rams that we haven't seen in years, Vish, is they are establishing the run game. They ran the ball half the time last game. Whether it worked or it didn't in big chunks, they were committed to that. And that is not something we've seen from them. And I think that can help them be pretty damn good this year. And especially in the absence of Cooper Kupp, hopefully he's able to get healthy at some point. You definitely want to see him play football this year. But overall, there's a recipe for them to potentially win this game. Although I think it's a small one, that there's that chance there for sure.
So I guess I see it a little bit differently. Let's start with Larry's point about the 3rd and short and 3rd and manageable, because I think I have no arguments with the point. I think it makes sense. The issue I have is when I look at the Rams-Seahawks game, the Rams converted 9 of the 11 third downs they converted on 3rd and 4+. And so when you look at how the context of that game played out, it wasn't a game that the Rams won by getting to 3rd and manageable. It was actually a game where Stafford made a lot of big throws. The Seahawks played 12% of their snaps in dime personnel. Are we ever going to see the Niners put dime on the field? I doubt it. And if you looked at that game, a lot of the 3rd and long plays that they got to Tutu Atwell and stuff like that, they were able to get a middle of field close one robber, one rat look from Seattle and get man coverage. And McVay was really, really good with how he used motion, kind of like how McDaniel motions Tyreek Hill with Tutu Atwell to create a favorable one-on-one matchup in man coverage. And then Stafford made big time throws. I agree Nkua's look good, and I agree he doesn't look like an undrafted player. He just looks like a tough, gritty football player. He looks like the classic New England Patriots receiver, does he not? But when I look at how the Rams can beat the 49ers and how they beat the Seahawks, I just don't think that that's translatable, because I think you guys are absolutely right about how the Rams need to beat the 49ers. My issue is they didn't do any of those things to beat the Seahawks. They did things that I don't think they'll be able to do against the 49ers. The Niners aren't going to go man coverage against their 5 receiver look. They're not going to put dime on the field. They're going to play zone a lot more. They're going to get pressure with 4, which Seattle can't necessarily do the same way as them. And if you get the Niners defense in 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, especially in Levi's South, with that place loud and Eric Armstead playing the way he is, and Javon Hargrave looked like a monster week 1. And as Richard Sherman calls him, Nicholas John Bosa, he looks really, really good, and he looks just as fit as ever. To me, again, I don't want to be premature, because I feel like anytime I'm confident about a pick, it's wrong either way. Like I was confident week 1, I was wrong. I'm so confident about this, I could be completely wrong, but I just don't see it on paper how the Rams are going to win this football game, because
you got to remember that
described to me. Go ahead.
Don't forget this though. The Rams, there were no turnovers in that Seattle game. It wasn't like they went to Seattle, got a bunch of turnovers and won big. The turnovers were totally even. If you just have a couple bad bounces that go against the Niners and the Rams possess the ball, it could be very similar to the Atlanta game last year, where teams that possess the football for big chunks of time seem to make Kyle Shanahan a little impatient. I think the Niners beat the Rams because I think Brock Purdy's quite a bit better than Geno Smith, and I don't think the Rams, defensive success that they had against Seattle is going to continue this week. That's why I think the Niners win. But it wasn't like a turnover fest, where things got away. If the Rams go +2 in turnovers this week and state of their control the clock. Anything can happen. It's an NFL game. I think the Niners win 31-17. I mean, that's what I would predict. But I wouldn't be shocked at all if this game was super low scoring at halftime.
Let's also not forget that Donald's going to get his fair share of one-on-ones with Burford. Is that something we want to see? And McKivitz.
Yeah.
Right now, and listen, PFF is not gospel, but I actually I have to agree with this based on how I saw them play. Right now, Burford, after 1 week, is ranked 65th out of 65 guards that played last week. And McKivitz is ranked 63rd out of 65 tackles that played last week. That's about as bad as it gets. The right side has to prove something. Now, I really don't think the Rams are the team to exploit that and ultimately win this game. I have a score very similar to yours, Larry, 31-13, but I mean, you just never know. You never know.
Burford, I did talk to today, and I'll say this, man. I love that kid. He's not in any way shy about discussing his struggles at times, his development. He's very focused on Donald. We did talk today about what the real challenge of Donald, guys, is that he's so big and so strong and so small and compact that offensive linemen, their strike area on him is so small. So you have to be so precise when you're firing out your hands, or you can whiff altogether. And then if you whiff, he's so powerful and so fast, your quarterback's on the ground 2 seconds later. So it's he's a huge challenge. He might be the best defensive tackle we've ever seen. I mean, we've all seen Mean Joe Green and Reggie White and
Warren Sapp.
Warren Sapp. The late Jerome Brown.
Cortez
take whoever. Cortez Kennedy. God, I love Cortez Kennedy. Bryant Young. We've seen a lot of good defensive tackles. John Randall. Different guys, fast guys, huge guys. But he might be the best. He might actually be the best defensive tackle that ever played, because
I think it's him and the Reverend.
What's that? Him and Reggie?
I think it's him and the Reverend, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Mean Joe Green was, special on some incredible 70s Steelers teams. But yeah, I mean, Randy White was awesome with the Cowboys in the 70s. But no, I agree. I agree. I think Reggie White was so big, so powerful, but this guy is 4.6 speed at 290 on a sawed-off 6-foot frame with no surface area to block.
Right.
And
the highest
incredibly
motor ever.
Strong and so productive. I mean, this was one of
His
the greatest
motor is
college
off the
football
charts.
players ever,
Fitness
and now
and
he's
motor.
been one of the best ever. Yeah.
His cardio and his motor, too. Never
Off the
so
charts.
underrated. Plays every snap. Similar to Javon Hargrave, by the way, in terms of playing a lot of snaps. Jeremy Price says, no, I'm good with talking all teams, but Seattle and the Cowgirls, Vish, don't do it again. Just plead the fifth. Sorry, Jeremy. But maybe I should pick against the 49ers again, given what happened. Have you ever seen me more confident about picking a game? I usually refrain from doing it. I finally did it, and look at what happened. I brought good juju to the 49ers because my picks are so bad. Jeremy Price also says.
Actually, real quick, I was just going to say, and I brought this up with Grant yesterday, the 49ers aren't going to go undefeated, I wouldn't assume. But until they lose, can you honestly pick against them at this point? I don't think I can. I got to see them lose before I'm willing to pick against them.
For sure.
I mean, Dallas, sure. I mean, that's going to be a challenge, but I got to see them actually lose before I'm picking against them.
Right.
Jesse, that's a great point. That is a great point. You can't pick against the Niners right now. It would take either a loss or a crazy unique assortment of bad timing injuries where you would even go, yeah. You know, they lost 3 offensive linemen. They're playing the Cowboys, and the Cowboys are sacking the quarterback like a madman, something like that. But right now, yeah, the Niners under Purdy, he's a great competitor. Let's be honest. The Niners, they lucked into this kid. He's a crazy great competitor, and they knew they liked him, but they probably didn't know he was this kind of a competitor. Nobody in the NFL knew he was this kind of a competitor or had this kind of escapability. And the combo in today's game means a ton.
Agreed. Jeremy Price also said, so spit it out, especially you, OG Larry, who you got. No writing the fence. We all said we got the 49ers.
Niners.
Sure.
So there's another topic I wanted to talk to you both about. I talked to it briefly with Rohan yesterday, and it's the Niners corner situation. And I think their corner situation is very interesting because Shanahan had pointed out why Ambry Thomas got benched in so many words. If you go watch the film, as he said, you can see there's quite a few assignment busts there on why they replaced Ambry Thomas so early in that game with Isaiah Oliver. The issue is the guy they replaced him with, while he played mostly fine, replacing Ambry Thomas and moving Diamador Lenore back outside, he was a guy that was not in the trust tree despite getting guaranteed money this offseason because of assignment busts in the preseason. To me, right now, they have this unique situation where, let's forget about the talent of their corners. They only have 2 guys that they trust right now. And it is about getting the best assortment of a third guy because I don't think they have a third corner that they trust. I don't think Sam Womack is in their trust tree. I don't think Ambry Thomas is clearly not in their trust tree, especially not after what happened in week 1. And Isaiah Oliver has to earn his way back into the trust tree. How do you think this situation plays out? Do you think one of these guys emerges and we see the Niners have a trio that's solidified by next week, the week after that? It's not going to happen immediately. It is something to monitor as the season goes on. And then how do you think this trio ultimately shakes out? Is it with Lenore kicking inside and Ambry Thomas or Sam Womack coming in and playing outside? Or is it how they finished the Steelers game and how they originally intended this cornerback trio to be when they gave Oliver the money they gave him, which is Lenore on one side, Mooney Ward on the other side, and then I almost called him Lenore, Isaiah Oliver in the slot. Krueg, you seem to be chomping at the bit to get at this one. I'll go to you.
Well, and the latest is Womack didn't practice today. He's got some kind of a knee injury. Now they expect him to go on Sunday, but he didn't practice today.
Okay,
so I think this team blew it when they let Deshaun Jameson go to Carolina. I mean, come on, man. When a guy covers in the NFL, he makes the team. If you show in the preseason you can cover, you make the team. And this guy showed he could cover, and they exposed him to waivers, and somebody out there was watching their film and saw that he played well in the preseason, and Carolina plucked him. And probably if they hadn't, somebody else would have. So that's a real loss. And I think in the same year that they wind up kind of voluntarily coughing up a really good corner just because they couldn't decide between Jalen Moore and Matt Pryor, which I would have just went with Jalen Moore and kissed Matt Pryor goodbye and kept my corner. Instead, they kept both tackles and they said goodbye to Jameson. But I think in the same year they waved goodbye to Jameson almost voluntarily, I think they're going to wind up trading for a corner. You know, I mean, I think they're going to wind up needing an extra corner as this thing goes. You've got Quantrez on the practice squad, and he's not bad. And Trey Swilling had some moments in camp, I guess. But I mean, other than that, those are your backups. Oliver's been mediocre. I like what I see out of Lenore, but and Ward's been fantastic. But Ward, you guys always knows, gets some kind of a groin at some point. He's not going to be able to play the full season. Thomas is just, he's volatile, he's talented, but he's inconsistent. And that's it. That's the wrap on all your guys. So to me, they could use another corner. And they probably will wind up trading for one later this year.
Jesse.
That's a great point, Larry. The very last point is where I wanted to get, because the 49ers have a ton of cap space. They can make these lopsided deals. They have two issues potentially on this team. We'll see how it plays out. Maybe as the weeks go, these things improve. But as of right now, they have two potential issues. One of them, we talked about, right guard, right tackle, the whole right side of the offensive line. Now, going and getting right guards and right tackles at trade deadlines, not very easy to do, probably very unlikely. However, going and getting skill position players at trade deadlines, much easier. And maybe corner is where they go and get that player. It wasn't just Ambry Thomas and Oliver that didn't play well. Ambry Thomas was targeted 6 times. He gave up 5 catches. Oliver was targeted 3 times. He gave up 3 catches. And Deommodore Lenore was targeted 9 times and gave up 8 catches.
Yeah. I mean, look at that. I
issue.
noticed that too.
There's an issue.
That's a high percentage, man. That is a really high percentage of completions. Yeah, here I wrote it down in my notes.
16
Thomas,
of 18.
Oliver,
they went on those
Lenore, and Hufanga allowed 18 catches on 21 targets. Now, granted, they were dropping into a soft zone most of the second half. They were kind of content to let Pickett pass it underneath. Heck, Greenlaw looked like he was inviting Pickett to pass it underneath so he could just kill people. I mean, he almost looked like, hey, throw it to my guy so I can bury him. I mean, he was just the hardest hitting player on the field on Sunday. But yeah, Thomas, Oliver, Lenore, and Hufanga, 18 catches on 21 targets. That's way too easy. I think it's situational football in impacting those stats, but still, it's something to watch for.
For sure.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, like you guys said, the 49ers have been excellent with their in-season trades, right? We've given them a lot of crap for their off-season trades and their in-draft trades, which maybe haven't worked out as well as a lot of us would prefer. But their in-season trades have always been terrific, right? Starting with Emmanuel Sanders in 2019. Then you got Jordan Willis in 2020. That was a good trade. I know Krueg would love Jordan Willis on the 49ers even now. Yeah, 2021, Charles Omenihu was an excellent trade. And then, of course, last year, Christian McCaffrey was an excellent trade as well. And to me, when you look at the corner market, it's not the best place to really go bargain shopping. There's really 2 questions, right? Are the Titans going to pay Christian Fulton, and are the Bears going to pay Jalen Johnson, right? Because those are maybe 2 guys that near the trade deadline you might be able to acquire and then let them walk in free agency. I haven't necessarily looked up how the compensatory formula would work out in that way. If I remember correctly, the Niners did get a compensatory pick for Emmanuel Sanders, so it would be kind of their ideal situation. If the Bears don't want to pay Jalen Johnson, he's a fine starter. He can play on the outside. You kick Lenore inside. You get Jalen Johnson for whatever amount of time. He walks and signs starter money somewhere else, and you get like a 4th or 5th round compensatory. It fits right with what the Niners want to do. That would be an option.
Well, I love Jalen Johnson, but it's not to jump in, but I love Jalen Johnson. Mm-hmm. To me, he's a phenomenal option. That's a great name. But if I'm them, I don't even know if I can wait till then. the guy that I'd be looking at is Amik Robertson. Didn't the Raiders cut Amik Robertson? Who got Amik Robertson? Did anybody get him? Because he's a good corner, man. He's a small corner, but he's a good slot receiver. They might have kept him actually. I still see him there. He might have made
He's
it.
on the Raiders crew. They kept him.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
if the Raiders fell out of it, I could see them, parting ways with a guy like that, and that would be a nice player. But the Niners better have their lookout for spots around the league. I mean, the nice thing here is that, as you said, Vish, this is kind of an area they've been all over.
Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't even rule out the fact that perhaps they gave Isaiah Oliver guaranteed money. I didn't believe in Isaiah Oliver, but they believe in Isaiah Oliver. I don't want to rule out the fact that, hey, he had a rough start to the offseason, but as games go, he gets a little bit of confidence and he starts to play decent enough to solidify himself as their nickel. I have very little faith in Ambry Thomas, but let's pretend Sam Womack really shows something in practice and he emerges as that guy. So I don't want to omit the options that they have there as well. I think the one thing I do want to say is that it's very clear right now only two guys are in the trust tree. It's kind of the same thing with the running back situation, right? Only two guys are in the trust tree. Obviously McCaffrey, and it's only Elijah Mitchell of the backup guys that you feel like they really trust. I think it's a similar situation at corner. They trust Diamador Lenore whether he had a poor game versus Pittsburgh or not. I mean, they love Diamador Lenore. It's clear they have faith in him. They have faith in him in either spot. They think he's a good player. Obviously, Mooney Ward, they signed for a lot of money, and he's completely lived up to that. Really, the question to me is, can they trust that third corner? He doesn't even have to play great. He doesn't have to be the next, Carlos Rogers in the slot. I don't know why that's the first slot corner I thought of, but let's go with him in 2011. But he just has to be a guy that they can trust. And I think that's the difficulty right now. Ambry Thomas, Isaiah Oliver, these guys are busting assignments. It's not that they're getting beaten because they're not talented. They're making critical mistakes on doing their job. And that's why I'm maybe a little bit more concerned and why I wanted to discuss it with both of you.
Yeah. These things may turn around, but at some point you have to look at these position groups that we've talked about, corner outside of Travarius Ward and the right side of the offensive line. Look at the money that's spent on these players and look at the draft capital that has been spent on these players. We're talking about low-level draft picks who aren't making a lot of money. Like, you do get what you pay for in the NFL for the most part. Yeah. Sometimes you get guys that Hufanga right now, drafted late, balling out of control. You got him on the cheap for a few years. Brock Purdy, same thing. But that is not usually the case. Usually it's like you got a late-round draft pick. They're a late-round draft pick for a reason. You didn't spend a lot of money on this player in free agency. There's a reason that they didn't get a lot of money in free agency. So there's not a lot of capital either through the draft or money spent on these players. It's no surprise that maybe you're seeing some of these struggles. And, hopefully they don't continue. But if they do, you really can't be shocked by it.
True.
Well, no, I'm still kind of in that mode of we don't know exactly what direction this thing's going. So it's like, there's so much. It's like making real decisions after mile one of a marathon, right? I mean, you'd be like, well, let's get 10, 12 miles into this thing, and then we'll see where it's going. But you never know. I mean, you never know who's going to be available. You never know how the NFL season. It might be somebody you can pick off waivers. They've done a decent job. It seems like there's always some decent players hanging around. I totally agree with what Jesse's saying, though. I mean, you typically get what you pay for, and they are leaning on some low, some day 3 pick guys. But that's the way football is now. But we'll see. We'll see how the injuries fare. They were the one best part of week 1 is they got out of there really injury free in what should have been on paper maybe their most painful physical game of the year. I watched the Steelers in all 3 of those preseason games. They hit hard and they play hard. And when I asked Shanahan and Purdy the weekend going into that, that's what they both said. They said, "Oh man, this team plays hard." So they got out of that game against a team that's great competitors with a great head coach who plays hard, very physical with very little lost players. So maybe that's a good sign.
Yeah, I agree. And I do think that Jesse's point about you getting what you pay for is absolutely right on. But I don't think the talent is really the issue at this cornerback position, right? I don't know that any of us are expecting Oliver to play a certain type of way or Ambry Thomas to be a certain type of thing. I guess my bigger concern and the reason I think it is maybe a little bit more concerning, even though we're mile one in the marathon, is they don't seem to have a guy they can trust. It's less about, hey, is this guy really, really good? Because, for example, you bring up the offensive line. They trust Colton McKivitz. They trust Spencer Burford. They're going to go through the growing pains with those two guys because they believe they can do the job. Now, Colton McKivitz is always going to do the job to a certain level because at the end of the day, he's Colton McKivitz' 4th-round pick. He's not Trent Williams. He wasn't gifted with that kind of ability. But they at least trust him to do the job that they're going to expect of him, and that job is going to have a much lower expectation than the one they're going to expect from Trent Williams. To me, the issue is that there's lower expectations for Oliver, there's lower expectations for Ambry Thomas, but they don't even seem to be able to trust these guys to execute the job, right? It's like Dante Johnson. It's not that anybody ever expected Dante Johnson to do anything, but they always had faith that if they put Dante Johnson in the slot, he'll do what he's supposed to do. They
Well,
put
he's
Dante
still out
Johnson
there.
on
They
the
can call
outside,
him.
he'll do what he's so old and injured.
And
at
you
this
know they're
point.
going to call him. I mean, it's like I bet you Dante Johnson's staying at some Santa Clara Hyatt somewhere. You know, I mean, seriously, he's probably hiding out as we speak. I'll tell you the guy that I'm kind of eyeballing down the road, and tell me if you guys like this name. But I mean, obviously, you know, Aaron Rodgers going down ended the Jets' real chances, and they've got DJ Reed. And DJ Reed would be, was an original Niner. I interviewed him from his draft party the day he was drafted, and he's emerged as a really nice veteran corner who can play in the slot. He can play outside. He's really tough, good against the run. I'd gladly give up a 5th-round pick to the Jets for DJ Reed in October, and that's the kind of move.
You think they'll get DJ Reed for a 5th-round pick?
Yeah, probably, maybe a 4th. A 4th or a 5th. Yeah, I think he's
a top 15. He's a top 15 starting corner in the
Fine.
sport.
You want a 3rd? It's a Super Bowl.
It's got to be a 3rd. They drafted him for a 5th. You think they could give up a 5th for him now?
Well, I mean, all I got to say is, we all can go look at NFL trades through the years, and when it gets in season, it just seems like there's very few players that really command the big draft picks. There's more guys who get traded for kind of like what look what Steve Young was traded for. There's a lot of trades where it's like Anquan Bolden. The Niners gave a 6th-round pick to get Anquan Bolden. He was their best receiver. So I don't know. I always think
there's a salary cap situation though that equated to a lot of those kinds of trades, right? We just saw one this summer with Jalen Ramsey getting moved to a 3rd from the Rams to the Dolphins. The issue I have is I don't see why the Jets have a salary cap issue where they're going to sell low on one of their better football players.
I wouldn't then I would offer them the 3rd because I think that's a unique player. The Niners care about their culture. I think they already know that he kind of fits into their culture, and he's physical and tough and has swagger. I think he would be a really nice addition, but we'll see. I mean, as you said, they have found the answers to their problems in the trade market in multiple times in the past. And I got to think that part of the restructuring and creating the cap room they did was to give themselves the flexibility to do exactly what we're talking about right now.
Mm-hmm. Jesse, I see you furiously looking something up, so I want to know.
Well, no. Somebody said that the Vikings are going to win, so I was like, "Oh, is the game already over?" So
no, it's 27-21 Philadelphia. It's a terrible game, dude. Philadelphia should be losing this game, but the Vikings are giving them the ball like it's they're giving out candy on Halloween. That's how
I need these teams to stop. I need these teams to stop scoring touchdowns. I mean, what the heck?
Why, you got Greg Joseph or something?
No, I got the under.
Fantasy?
I got the under. Let me see what I got in this game. I've got the under. I've got the Eagles and the under. So the Eagles are winning. I've got the Eagles plus 1.5. And I've got
the under is risky business in Thursday Night Football, man.
I took the home, I went with under 50, but I have 57.5. So right now, what am I at? I'm at 48.
48. Yeah.
You know what we've learned in the last 2 weeks?
I'm a degenerate.
Larry is a degenerate gambler.
Yeah. Hey,
I love how Larry knew it was coming.
Can we? Shh, let's try to keep that.
I will say this because Larry is sporting his beautiful Philadelphia green.
That's right.
The Eagles look a lot more like the team that I described this offseason
The
than
Eagles
team
and
that we
Chiefs
saw
have not
last
started
year.
good. So that's me. It's because the Niners look that much better.
They missed Shane Steichen, and New England had a real. You want to talk about a good plan? New England was effing with Jalen Hurts by going cover 0 and then flipping out a cover 0, rushing 3, dropping 8, doing that. And Minnesota, Brian Flores, same kind of school of defense, is following a similar kind of plan here. The drop 8 plan. We got another one, Krug. We got another one that we got to monitor.
What are we monitoring?
Oh, Minnesota's dropped 8 and rushed 3 a lot in this game with Jalen Hurts. New England
Really?
2 at times, and they kind of messed with him because they would sometimes play cover 0, then they would sometimes do that, and they really messed with his eyes and made him check the ball down a lot post snap and not give him opportunities to run. And he's been bottled up by Jalen Hurts MVP favorite kind of standards from last year. He's been kind of bottled up.
Jordan Addison
Yeah,
on my fantasy team has scored as well, so I'm feeling good about that.
When I looked at the Eagles this year in particular, in the way that they've started out, has kind of been up to expectation. You're talking about a team that lost both their coordinators. I believe they drafted phenomenally well, but those are still young players that are replacing big time veterans. I think the Eagles are still going to be very good, but they had the look of a team that was going to kind of start out slow and maybe have some ups and downs until they really hit their stride the second half of the season or even a little bit later. For them, if they can get out of a Thursday night football game with a win and then also had traveled to New England and got the win last week, I mean, I think that's a major plus for that team as they're trying to figure things out to still be 2-0. We'll see if they pull out the win today, but I'm not really surprised by this.
But both wins look very, very 2019 Rams-ish, who started 3-0, and all 3 wins were a little bit sus. I agree, though, I think that they'll put it together in the second half of the season. And we were talking about great defensive tackles earlier in the show, and they have a guy who they drafted number 9 overall, who I think we all knew was pretty special in college, and he looks like he's going to be one of the next great defensive tackles that we talked about. Is he not? Jalen Carter looks unreal, man.
He is unreal. Guy was awesome at Georgia. I mean, and as a freshman, he was awesome. By the way, Josh Sweat in that game has 5 hits on the quarterback. The Eagles have hit
Darisaw got hurt and their center's out as well.
But they have 9 hits on the QB. He's got 5 of the 9.
That's what I was saying. Like, I think the loss of Hargrave was a bit overblown for that team in particular because that defensive line is still really, really good.
They drafted one of the most special defensive tackles I've ever seen to come into the NFL. So
he's incredible.
That helps. Yeah.
And Roseman's a great GM, guys. I mean, he really is. I mean, the guy they signed away, who played at Vandy, Cunningham, he's been good tonight. He's leading them in tackles. He's got a tackle for a loss. He's a big, rangy linebacker. He's not even old. They picked him off the street.
Yeah, so Tennessee traded for him, right, last year?
Yeah, that was nice. Zach Cunningham, that's a good pickup for the Eagles. I mean, they picked up him and Miles Jack, and then Jack retired. But
they picked up DeAndre Swift, who's gone crazy tonight.
Yeah, but
although their linebackers are a little suspect still, and they lost Nakobe Dean already to start the season, so that's kind of the weakness.
New coordinators and there's a lot of turnover there. Plus, the Eagles, they don't look like the same Eagles from last year. I mean, they have run for 250 tonight, so they're but Minnesota is a notorious horrible run D. But I don't know. Eagles, I think they lose a lot. They lost Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. To me, watching Chauncey Gardner-Johnson in Detroit, man, that was a big move. That was the guy the Niners should have gotten to replace Jimmy Ward, was Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. And how he got to Detroit, they should have made a big play for him.
They could have drafted him. Instead, they chose to trade down 10 picks and take Mitch Wishnowsky. I have a feeling that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson wasn't in their character eval of what they view.
Who cares about your character eval? This guy's awesome.
You know they care though, Larry, right? If they traded, they had this guy, they had a chance to draft him with the second pick in the 4th round. And when he came out of Florida, I'm sorry that I'm not saying that all of us know something that they don't know, but most of us looked at him as a 2nd round type player. A lot of us thought that he was going to be a very, very good player. And they traded down 10 picks to take a 28-year-old punter. It tells you all they thought of him.
But I mean, to me,
they needed a corner too.
I think this guy runs a little hot. But I think overall, I don't think he's a bad guy, and he is a terrific football player. I mean,
I agree.
Guys, we're looking at one of the best players. This guy was damn good with the Saints. He was monster in the Super Bowl. How about the hit he had on Pacheco in the Super Bowl? The guy is a tone-setting bad A, and the Niners needed him to replace Jimmy Ward, and instead they went with Isaiah Oliver. I mean, the differences are staggering, and that could be the difference between winning in the Super Bowl and not winning the Super Bowl. So credit Detroit, credit Detroit for getting that guy. They needed him, and they got Emmanuel Mosley from the Niners, and they have a whole new culture on their back end, and they look kind of scary suddenly.
Krug, what was the over-under?
Let's actually look at that too real quick. Yeah, go ahead.
It's 57.5. Oh, it's going over for sure.
Go check the score. It's pretty close. Go ahead.
No,
it's
56.
Yeah.
Oh, it's 56.
Yeah. We'll see.
The only way I win this bet is if nobody scores again, basically.
Krug, I think we need to cut you off. This is 2 streams back to back where we've just seen you lose bet after bet.
This thing was there was 20 total points in the first half. There's been 35 scored in the second half.
Jesse, did you want to bring up Detroit? Sorry about that.
Well, I was just going to say they're playing Seattle. Seattle right now, it looks like, is going to be without both of their starting tackles. And if the 49ers win, they essentially have a 2-game lead on the whole division, potentially. I would assume Arizona's going to lose. I haven't even looked at who they're going to play, but I got to imagine they're going to lose. Seattle's likely going to lose to Detroit. And then if the 49ers beat the Rams, they have 1 game on them, but really it's 2 because of the tiebreaker. To start out this early in the season, 2 games in, to have a 2-game lead on the whole division, that's pretty good. But, I did want to announce that we have a new show sponsor. And since Larry's talking gambling, if you have a gambling addiction, there is help out there. There's a gambling addiction hotline. You can call 1-844-779-2673 if you have a gambling addiction. So I just want to make sure that
hey guys, hold on a second. Guys, I'll be right back.
Gambling addiction hotline.
I got to make a quick phone call. Yeah, no, I know. That was a teaser, 2-team teaser. Yeah, I went to the under. I shouldn't have done it. I know. So I do this a lot. Yeah.
Somebody's coming for your knees, Larry. I can
hold on.
Feel
there's
it.
There's a guy on hold who's done the same thing. Hold on. He's going to talk to me about it.
I will give this to Seattle. If there's a defense that you want to play without your 2 tackles, I know that they look better versus the Chiefs than they've looked. It's that defense. They don't rush the passer too well. But yeah, I agree.
Big John Kaminsky? Are you kidding me? And
Big John, dude, I thought Levi Onwuzurike would be a lot better than he is. He looked good in college when he came out, and yeah. And then Aiden Hutchinson's a really good player, but he's kind of their one guy. I mean, and granted, against the Detroit Lions, your tackle is allowed to line up offsides and jump off, false start basically every single play. So whoever's playing backup right tackle for the Seahawks should probably do that. Thank God, by the way, Justin Britt's gone. I hated that guy. Speaking of just Seahawks right tackles, just despise that guy. Breno Giacami.
By the way, just watching a little bit of Detroit on the All-22, now that I got the NFL Plus, I just wanted to check out Chiefs Lions. And so I did. Penei Sewell.
Oh.
Penei
Are you
Sewell.
So good.
I mean, that's you said if you could take one guy off another team and put him on your team to make your team like the super team, I would take Penei Sewell and put him at tackle. I mean, 6'5", 335, functional strength of 7 men. I mean, seriously, the guy is just a ridiculous offensive lineman. And that's what happens when you're bad for years. you look around and suddenly you got Aiden Hutchinson and you've got Ragnow and Panay Sewell and Taylor Decker and you've got all these blue chip guys, but man, Sewell is just a monster right tackle.
They really have a great offensive line there, and that is something that I think is going to keep Detroit in a lot of these games. A much improved defense. You already talked about the secondary. They are an interesting team. I still think they're maybe a notch below the 49ers and whoever's going to hang with the 49ers this year, whether that's Dallas or Philadelphia or whoever, but they're right there. They're getting close.
Yeah, and I think with their offensive line too, Seattle's defensive line, even with the new signings, look bad versus the Rams, unless Cam Akers was running the ball. Did Draymond Jones play? Did you guys see if Draymond Jones played?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he played. He had a penalty late.
Krug, you got to go with my joke. Come on, Krug. We're making fun of the Seahawks because Draymond Jones didn't look so good week 1.
Yeah, well,
can't just tell me he played. But
he was there.
He did play, but there was not the sighting of the guy they paid a lot of money for. And that's where, as much as I also talked about how I don't think the Lions have a lot of firepower in their defensive line, Seattle doesn't either. And man, could they use Jalen Carter? Couldn't they? Instead of Devin Witherspoon, I think he's still out with his hamstring injury too. And he could be a really, really good player. But we saw with Seattle, I think even versus the Rams, like the Rams offensive line, we will see them against the 49ers. They're not a good offensive line. Don't let them going into Seattle and being able to pass block on 9 of 11 third and 4 pluses and convert them, make you think that they're a good offensive line. They're about to get their asses kicked on Sunday.
But Avila, the left guard from TCU,
good.
He looks good.
He's a freaking house. That guy's a house. Agree. He's he might even be more like a condominium than a house.
What does that even mean?
Well, it's like a building. He's like a building. You know what I mean? That guy's just ridiculous. That's a very strong offensive guard that the Rams just got. The Rams offensive line is a mess, but that guy, the left guard, is very, very strong.
They'll build something. I don't doubt that they'll have a good offensive line in 2 to 3 years, possibly. But right now, you're right. It is a mess, but Avila does look good.
Sadly, it's better than it was last year, probably.
You think so?
That's how bad it was last year. Yeah, I think it's
maybe Stafford being healthier helps. His teeth.
They got. I don't know. Yeah, it was awful last year. Also, who knows?
Any further thoughts on the game? I mean, we've only gone for an hour and 16 minutes, guys. We can't do this. People expect us to get them ready for the game by going for 3 hours so that they can prepare to sit through a 3-hour football game.
Do
you have anything up there, Krug?
What about this game coming up?
About anything. What do you got?
About anything.
Right now, I've got nervousness because I've got 55 points scored in a game with 2 minutes left and now under 2 minutes. And if no more points are scored, I will cash on this bet. But if any more points are scored, I'll be very pissed off and I'll start breaking stuff.
Let's do something for a couple minutes.
I'll say one thing that I think is kind of interesting that I read this week, and I kind of went and did a deep dive, and I think they're kind of a slept-on team, and we don't talk a lot about them, but we will later this year because the Niners do play them. Do you guys know what team I'm going to talk about? Do you as my sleeper team? It's the Browns, and you watch the Browns.
I don't know if they're. I don't think they're a sleeper team at all. That's me personally.
They're a really strong team on the line of scrimmage. On their O-line's good too.
Yeah, very good.
You got the big Jedrick Willis, and Batonio's really underrated, always has been. And then they got Dawan Jones playing right tackle right now.
Stud.
He's just an absolute monster. And then
Wyatt Teller. I think they get the old Seahawks center, but you know what? They've got a really good
who ranked out really high last year. By the way, he was actually very, very good.
Yeah, and then Myles Garrett, Zardarius Smith, Okoronkwo is a decent pass rusher, and then they got Dalvin Tomlinson, who's
I was just about to bring him up.
He's a true two-gapper. They have Jordan Elliott, who's very underrated, and they've got Shelby Harris from Seattle and Mo Hurst the former Niner, and a lot of speed at linebacker and some good players on the back end. Thornhill's legit. Denzel Ward is super
Denzel Ward's
legit.
a superstar.
Yeah, I mean, I love Sione Takitaki. I don't just love saying it.
I knew you would.
I love JOK. JOK is one of my favorite players in the whole
good, yeah.
league. And then they've got corner-wise, I mean, look at that secondary. Delpit and Thornhill at the safeties. Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome. They got Martin Emerson, the Mississippi State kid. They've got some, watch out for the Browns, man. The Browns might be better than people think. They're good on the line of scrimmage, guys.
The issue. I agree. And they kicked butt. And look, maybe Cincinnati's offensive line sucks yet again, but they absolutely destroyed them between Myles Garrett, Zadarius Smith, and Dalvin Tomlinson is what they've needed for so long because they haven't had a run-stuffing defensive tackle. The issue I had is that the quarterback looked terrible. He looked terrible on Sunday. Deshaun Watson looked awful. He was one-hopping how many different passes to receivers, and maybe it was that weird field condition because Burrow didn't look too good either. But I think because they won, of the highly paid quarterbacks that look terrible, we didn't talk about Deshaun Watson. I guess maybe nobody wants to talk about Deshaun Watson in general. I was one of those people who thought that he might just return to who he used to be. Not that I'm necessarily rooting for it, just because I mean that talent doesn't go away. But maybe he isn't the same guy, and maybe he'll never be the same guy because he looked horrible in that game. But I do agree. The Browns roster, the Browns, everything around him looks legit. They have something creative with Elijah Moore. Amari Cooper is just a professional. He's a very, very just good player. Harrison Bryant and Njoku is a very underrated tight end duo. They have a lot of really, really nice things about their football team. But if Deshaun Watson plays like that, it's hard for me to look at them as
go to DTR. Put in DTR.
Perhaps. What do you think, Jesse?
Oh, I don't know how you do that when you've paid Deshaun Watson so much money, but that's really it. If Deshaun Watson at all during this season returns to form of what he used to be, then that team is absolutely stacked all the way through. And what Deshaun Watson's contract allows them to do, and it was something that I had talked about going into the offseason as to why the 49ers, should potentially look at like going after Lamar Jackson, is you actually can pay everybody around him because you can continue to push the money back year in and year out for 3 or 4 years because they're young. And that's exactly what they did. They created like $33 million in cap space when they restructured his contract, and they can do it next year and the year after that if they really feel like it. So it's just one of those things that I don't know. I don't know if he's going to get back to form. And if he doesn't, they could be in serious trouble long-term. But if he does, that team's really good. And in fact, when I was going through the schedule for the 49ers, that was one of the losses that I picked was against the Browns. And that's why I say I don't think that team's a sleeper team at all.
I'm Jesse. I'm so sorry. I was laughing because I saw the screen reflection on Krueg's face, and I know that he saw what I was planning to tell him after you finished, and I saw his face. I saw the disappointment. He was trying to hide it, but I saw his eyes droop, and I couldn't hold it in. How do you feel, Krueg?
How do I feel? How do you think I fucking feel? I feel like I just lost, all right? I feel like I just lost. 34-28. My God. 42 points in the second half. 42 in the second half.
Thought he had it in the bag going into the second half, too.
I know.
Just avalanche of offense. Eagles don't have a championship caliber defense. They just allowed 28 points.
To a team that turned it over like 4 times, too. Speaking of your point with the Rams not having to deal with the turnovers, the Vikings turned it over like 4 times. So it's not like the Eagles look good on offense either.
Vikings, have you thought maybe about running the football a little bit?
With who?
They have Madison. They had 28 yards rushing tonight. They get outrushed 254-28.
Which is
Run
crazy,
the ball.
too. On the road with that many offensive line injuries, and they gave them nothing. They just kind of got away from it.
Kirk Cousins doesn't win big games, though.
Doesn't matter. When it's all said and done, the Kirk Cousins story will be looked upon so much more favorably than people realize. Somebody's going to take a look at those stats 25 years from now when Kirk is done, and they're going to be like, why did everybody rip on this Kirk Cousins guy? Look at his rating. Look at all of that. And the entire Shanahan tree will be cracking open beers on that day and be like, see, I told you guys about this guy. We knew he was a good quarterback. We were telling everybody he's the best quarterback, and it'll be a beautiful story. What do you think of that, Krueg?
Well, I'll tell you right now, if I'm the Jets, I am reaching out to the Vikings tonight and saying, listen, we only have about 10 million in cap space. We cannot afford the whole Kirk Cousins, thing. But what we can do is we can give you a high draft pick.
I don't think they have one.
You pay a ton of, doesn't matter, even a future. I mean, they're going to lose Kirk Cousins in the offseason. So if it's a second rounder in 2 years or a first rounder in 2 years, like that's worth it. So what you do is you go to the Vikings and say, you pay half the salary or whatever it is they need them to pay, give them a draft pick that they can't refuse, and bring in Kirk Cousins and try to keep your championship hopes alive. That's what I would do if I was the Vikings.
So I would call the Rams, and I wouldn't even call McVay unless Snead. If I'm Woody Johnson, I'm calling Stan Kroenke and saying, we'll take this quarterback's contract off your hands with Matthew Stafford. You tank, and you get Caleb Williams in L.A. with Sean McVay and do that, and I'd trade the house for Stafford.
Heck, the league would be invested in having that happen.
If Kirk Cousins leaves the Vikings, they will have the number one pick.
You think so?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Wait a second. The Arizona Cardinals are out there, and
you
they
don't believe in the
backup
of the Minnesota Vikings? You mean the guy that has the third most passing yards in his first 10 starts in NFL history, only behind Andrew Luck and Patrick Mahomes? You don't believe
they're awful
guy?
with Kirk Cousins,
but you don't.
Now you take him away.
Do you know who the backup is? We're talking about a guy that has the third most passing yards in his first 10 starts in NFL history. A guy who's behind just Andrew Luck and Patrick Mahomes. A guy who beat Russell Wilson in 2018 in his prime.
You're right. No, that's a good point. I forgot that they had Money Mullins. I forgot. Nope. You're right. I forgot. You're right. Okay, good point.
Thank you.
Good point.
Thank you.
Big night tonight for Cal's Cameron Bynum. My God, 15 tackles. Now, probably a lot of those down the field against receivers, so that's not a good thing. But so that's a ton of tackles for him. And by the way, if your Niners do need some edge rush help later this year, Danielle Hunter 3 sacks tonight. 3 sacks for Danielle Hunter.
I thought the $41 million, that was the name. Like in my dreams, when the Niners open up cap space, like in Madden and like my dreams, that's what I think of. But that was the first name. When all that space opened up, I was like, damn, if the Vikings can somehow start like 0-4, 0-5, all the good karma they had last year just washes away and they stink. And right now we're 50% of the way there. Danielle Hunter asks out. The Niners trade for Danielle Hunter. Are you kidding?
Oh, that would be, they'd be unstoppable.
They're pretty, I mean, it's a good team, but it's going to be interesting to see. It will all be determined by the injuries, of course. Right now they could probably get by with everything they got, but there's going to be some injuries along the way.
You guys want to touch on Drake Jackson real quick? Because he's obviously been getting a lot of credit for that game. He had the 3 sacks, obviously. To me, the 3 sacks were a little bit of product of, hey, Eric Armstead, who didn't record a stat on the stat sheet, he made more impact on those 3 sacks than Drake Jackson, who completed the play. But I did want to compliment Drake Jackson on one thing, and then I wanted to get your thoughts on it. Because I thought the one thing he did well, and to me it shows something maybe a little bit different from other Niners DNs, is that his rush depth and his rush lane integrity was very, very strong throughout that game. It wasn't that he was beating the tackle out of the edge, but he never got his depth beyond Pickett, which meant that if he doesn't get his depth beyond Pickett, even if Pickett escapes the pocket, it's very easy for him to disengage and then use his athleticism and speed to run him down, which is basically what he did for all 3 of his sacks. It's also a little bit different because when you rush around the quarterback, that's what gives lanes for the quarterbacks to escape. And we've talked about that with the Niners defensive line, sometimes not being the most disciplined in letting quarterbacks out of the pocket, and the issues with mobile quarterbacks we've discussed with this defense for the last 4 or 5 years. So I don't know that Drake Jackson, even though he has some star-like traits, I don't know that he's going to be that kind of player. But I thought in terms of being a complimentary rusher to the 3 other star level players on this team, I thought he did a really nice job, and that resulted in him getting 3 sacks. He certainly didn't have, he had one of the more, less, I guess, impressive 3-sack performances I've ever seen, even though it was 3 sacks. But I did think that he was very, very good with his rush integrity and his rush depth by not getting beyond the quarterback. What do you guys think?
100% agree. 100% agree with that. And I think the last part that you touched on is what gets me is the athleticism as well. That is one thing that the 49ers have struggled with in years past is the mobile quarterback. Maybe, just maybe, Drake Jackson is the exact perfect guy to remedy that. He may not be an elite pass rusher yet anyways, and who knows if he ever gets there, but if he can be the one to really remedy the mobile quarterback, then that brings an element that the 49ers have not had for a while. I mean, Eric Armstead, if you remember, he was a defensive end before they kicked him inside. He was never great at it. A lot of quarterbacks got mobile on his side. And the other thing is that athleticism it's just through the world. So even if a quarterback breaks containment, he can actually track him down. There was a play in training camp, and Larry, I know you remember this, where he went stride for stride downfield, breaking up a pass. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. He's an amazing athlete, and that at the very least will show through during this season. And I think that's a big, big help that the 49ers are getting from him, regardless of if he turns into a big sack guy or not.
It's funny. He's one of my favorite guys. I talked to him today for a minute, and he said it. And I asked him on the podium during training camp. I'm like, how do you feel to be, year 2 and the situation you're in? And he's like, before I could even get the question out, he's like, blessed. Yeah, just blessed. And he is. He's in a blessed position right now. All he's really got to do on every single snap is find the football and keep that motor going full bore. That's it. Just simplify things. Find the ball, motor runs. He'll run into stuff. He ran into stuff this week. Just always find the ball. He's going to fall into 12 sacks because, he's smart enough to know the angle, so he can, as long as he can find where the quarterback is in the pocket, just keep that motor going. You got Bosa on one side, you got Hargrave up the middle, you got Armstead holding the point. They're going to play all kinds of coordinated games. You got, maybe the 2 best blitzing backers in the game in Greenlaw and Warner. They're flying at the quarterback. You got all kinds of options. I think they're going to be able to protect him against the run, and I think he's going to wind up with like 12 and a half, 13 sacks. I think he's going to wind and just keep that motor running. That's all he's got to do. Doesn't even have to beat anybody. Like normally pass rushers only get a sack as if they beat somebody with their initial rush. This guy doesn't even need to beat his guy with the initial rush. Just keep the motor going, keep the feet going, find the ball, and he'll just run into sacks with Bosa and these other 3 guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I'm glad you brought up the run game because the other guy, Cleveland Ferrell, actually had a very, very strong game in week 1. He had a strong game against the run, and he was not bad as a pass rusher. So that was another somewhat unexpected bright spot, though Pittsburgh doesn't, I guess, have the best offensive line. I guess we do have to mention that too.
That's true. That's a very good point.
But it's not okay. So it's not the best line, but it's not like it's the bottom third of the league. I mean, it's just kind of a middling line. That's what I would describe it as. There's no super distinctive great player there, but it's a well-coached line. They communicate well. And there's, their tackles have long arms. Their guards are tough. You know what I mean? There's not a star on that group.
There's not many great offensive line units in the NFL. Vish, I used to hear you talk about this 2 years. Yeah, period. Yeah, I used to hear you talk about this 2 years ago, and I absolutely agree with it. So better than anybody that, I mean, it's the way that it is.
Yeah.
if you have 4 legitimate defensive linemen, and there are a few teams that do in this league, more teams that have 5 legitimate offensive linemen, that's for sure, you're usually ahead of the game.
Yeah, and even the teams that we say have a good offensive line, it's more the quarterback, man. You need, at this point, when you get to the highest level and you're dealing with these pass rushes and all of that, every team at the top of the league has a strong pass rush and they're going to get pressure with 4. It's, can your quarterback operate from tight spaces and can he operate under pressure? And for me, the best example of this is the Rams. Why they won a Super Bowl with Stafford versus Goff was exactly that. They went from having a quarterback who struggled, having to drop back in obvious drop back situations and be able to make decisions and big time throws with people around him into tight windows. And they had a quarterback, even though he was a little mistake prone. The one thing Stafford does even today at a level that's top of the league, top half of the league, is find space within the pocket, throw with very little space around him, and make big time throws with people around him into tight windows. He has a special knack and ability to do that. And we saw him do that last Sunday for why they beat the Seahawks. I mean, the last throw he throws, the corner, in Kua, the last first down that they get to kind of seal the game, that throw is utterly ridiculous. There's no window to make the throw. I know you saw that, Krug. You said you watched the L-22.
Yeah, I mean, Stafford bailed them out. I mean, Stafford is looking like a big time player, and he can make a lot of ordinary receivers look good. I mean, he had some extraordinary receivers in Detroit, but I mean, Atwell's a burner, and the other guy there. It's funny. It's like Atwell can create space just by being on the field because he's that fast, and then Nakua is like a 5-year veteran, even though he's a rookie. Just think of like a 5-year possession receiver veteran. When Kupp comes back, this team, could be a surprise this year if they can get any kind of run game going. Now, they don't seem to have much of a run game, and I don't think they'll get it going against the Niners. But weirder things have happened, and the Niners struggled to stop the run in the preseason. And the one thing we will find out in this game is the Rams are going to test the 49er run D. And they're going to because in their world, they shorten the game, they get a couple turnovers, and they win. That's how they're going to win. I think right. McVay knows what kind of team he has, and that's the sign of a great coach, right? So he's playing to his talent, which is put it all in Stafford's hands and make this a referendum on his accuracy, finding his receivers on third downs against the defense. And I like the Niners' chances to win big, but they've got a shot. They got a puncher's shot of winning the game. The Rams do. Yeah,
and before we go, I don't know if there's much more to add. I think we might have covered all bases here. I will also add the Stafford point about him with receivers. It's very, very underrated. He has a Big Ben kind of effect where a lot of receivers don't have the kind of production that they have away from him, and then they come with him. And because of his ability to throw the ball down the field and his ability to take chances with people around him and allow his guys to make plays, he allows them to have stats. I mean, we know Calvin Johnson. Everybody wants to attribute that. But post Calvin Johnson, Marvin Jones Jr., where has he had success in the NFL other than in Detroit with Matthew Stafford? Golden Tate was a good player in Seattle. His production with the Stafford was phenomenal. Kenny Golladay, what happened to his career since he was with Matthew Stafford? Even Cooper Kupp, right? Cooper Kupp is a special football player, all of that. People didn't realize. Who thought Cooper Kupp was going to win the Triple Crown before he actually won it in 2021? The guy was a good receiver. Nobody thought Cooper Kupp was going to lead the league in stats in every which stat, and then he gets with Stafford and does that. So Stafford just has an effect on producing with these kinds of receivers. It's like Big Ben when he used to produce with Mike Wallace and Emmanuel Sanders and Antonio Brown and all these different. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so there is an effect that way. And so, sure, he can put up stats with Van Jefferson, Tutu Atwell, and Nkua versus a team like Seattle. But then when you're playing the Niners, those guys got to win, man. And they're not going to win against the Niners defense. It's tough, too tough. But you're right, Krug. They will try to run the football, and they're going to be committed to it, as Jesse pointed out earlier.
They're going to commit to the run. And then they've got a couple playmakers on defense, too. I mean, I watched them. The Tennessee kid, Byron Young, is in this 3-4 defense. Mm-hmm. He's a threat off the edge. He's got a lot of speed. He's really, really athletic. Obviously, back. Donald is Donald, right? He's very, very special. Ernest Jones is, just you say that name, it means nothing to anybody, but he's playing at a really, really high level. The Rams inside backer, he made a ton of tackles and just
Great
was
speed.
all over the field. And then it's on paper, it's a bad secondary. I mean, Akella Witherspoon's their number one corner. They have Darion Kendrick. They have
Jordan Fuller's back. He's a good player.
Kobe Durant. You know, the Raiders cut Duke Shelley. They picked him up. So, you know, I mean, it's not a great secondary, but and that guy Van Valkenburg can make some plays too. I've seen him too. But Ernest Jones, Byron Young, and Aaron Donald. You get those three guys blocked, you could have a big day against the Rams. I expect the Niners to be able to put 30 on the board.
Jesse, any final closing words? I'll give you the last word. We haven't heard from you in a couple minutes there.
No, I completely agree with Larry. That's like I said, he picked it 31-17. I said yesterday 31-13. I just don't see that the Rams are in a position right now to really test the 49ers. And, you know, really the landscape of the NFC is possibly more wide open than what we've ever thought. I mean, the 49ers have got to cash in this year. Everything is shaping up for the 49ers to have a nice little path to the Super Bowl. And then even in the AFC, the big bad AFC, the top teams all lost over there as well. I know it's only 1 week. Obviously, we're going to see teams start to emerge and what have you. But the 49ers, for a team that we knew was elite going into the season, the question was always this: could they get the number 1 seed in the NFC? They always start slow. Well, guess what? That slow start looks to be completely out the window, because I think the only team before week 5 that has a chance to beat them was probably the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they were unable to do so. And not because Pittsburgh's a great team, but because they're very prepared. They did not look prepared at all. The 49ers looked very prepared. They played with a Super Bowl chip or desperation or whatever you want to call it. Week 1, that is not something we've seen from this team. We talked about the number 1 seed. We heard Debo talk about the number 1 seed. Kyle Shanahan talk about the number 1 seed. It's very, very important to them this year. And I think week in and week out, you're going to see a very driven and focused 49ers team that is supremely talented. If they get that number 1 seed, watch out.
I 100% agree. Before I give my score prediction, I do have a question for Mr. Larry Krueger.
Yes, sir.
Are you
Yes,
betting
sir.
on the game, and are you taking 49ers -8?
No, I try not to bet on the 49er games because I've got too many things, you know, riding anyway. It's like I'd rather just, you know.
Okay, I was about to predict a Rams backdoor cover with
I try to
Stafford
stay away
getting a
from the
couple of
Niners.
garbage touchdowns late if you were touching Niners -8. I'll take the Niners. I don't want to say 31. I'll go 34-17.
There you go.
One
We're
thing I
all
do
close.
want to mention,
13.
34-17. So, okay,
13,
we're
34-13. Let me rectify
34-13.
that.
And we're basically the same.
Yeah.
The Niners worked out Ian Book. I think he went to New England. Did you guys see
Yeah.
that?
Mhm.
You did.
But
Yep.
they also worked out 3 wide receivers. And the one guy that to me is really interesting is Freddie Swain. I don't know if you guys saw Freddie Swain at Florida, but he was a 6th-round pick by Seattle in 2020. And he was, I guess, with the Eagles before the final preseason game, didn't make the final 53, and then released by Seattle after training camp. Anyway, he's played with Denver, Miami. He's not a bad receiver. He's like 4'4" receiver with good size, really good ball skills. He's out there. They worked him out. I don't know if they're going to put him on their practice squad, but Freddie Swain, look for Freddie Swain, because that he's good. He's a good receiver. I don't know. They don't need a receiver and this and that, but it's always good. More good players is always a good thing.
I just wanted to bring this comment up because to me, Eric Armstead, Drake Jackson is balling out because of Eric Armstead. If anything, he's making Eric Armstead look more valuable, not expendable.
That's the I hate to say it, but I mean that's the reject comment of the night right there.
Oh, tough.
Wow.
I'm not
Well,
calling him
that's
a
tough.
reject. I'm not calling him a reject, but you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's like, come on, we got to reject that notion that what Eric Armstead is suddenly not good.
Yeah.
Why? Because he didn't make tons of tackles. If
It's
you
'cause he
watch that
didn't- he
game
wasn't on
again,
the
I thought
stat
Eric
sheet.
Armstead was very good.
Yeah, he was unbelievable.
I saw it live at the game. Like I had an all 22. It was interesting because when the 49ers were going or excuse me, when the Steelers were going away, I mean, I could see everything that the defensive line was doing. And then, as they got closer to us, I could as well. But he
He's so
dominated that
big.
game.
He's so
He
strong.
dominated that game, in my opinion, more than any defensive lineman for the 49ers did,
I
and
agree.
got zero stats to show for it.
I agree. That's the correct take to me as well. Javon Hargrave was very good too. It's close, but yeah. Oscar, we did talk about this. All three of us were talking Danielle Hunter.
Yeah.
I don't even think that one is as possible as we would all like it to be, but all of us would like the Niners to get Danielle Hunter. I think that's the show, guys.
And the Jets to get Kirk Cousins. That was the other part.
Yeah. Jesse wants that. Jesse's personally rooting for that after
You don't
Kirk
like
Cousins
Zach Wilson?
rejected the Jets.
I never liked
Larry,
Zach
this
Wilson.
is your moment. You
don't
believe
love
in
Zach
Zach
Wilson?
Wilson still.
I never liked Zach Wilson.
Zach Wilson just doesn't look ready for prime time, man.
He looks scared.
He just doesn't. He's just not consistent enough. You can kind of tell.
My thing with Zach Wilson, I didn't like him at all coming out of college. I think in the first 2 years, he's shown to be everything I thought he was. However, I've also said that I'm a 3-year guy when it comes to quarterbacks. So I wanted to see the third year. I thought for his sake that third year would come maybe in 2 years after learning from Brett Favre, and maybe he would be able to turn it around. Brett Favre was the perfect mentor for him. Unfortunately, that third year is coming immediately, and I think that is the type of thing that could flush him out of the league, or certainly into a backup role at best. Somebody will take a flyer, I'm sure, but it just doesn't sound like a recipe for success for Zach Wilson, unfortunately for him.
I wasn't like you. I actually did like Zach Wilson coming out of college. I still think he has starter traits. I think his issue is he's kind of stuck in his own Trey Lance situation. That team got ready way too quickly for him, and they're not ready for the growing pains that he needs to go through because he is pretty raw and unpolished, and he needs to build his confidence, and they don't need a quarterback who can do that. That's why they did the Mike White thing last year. I think they kind of broke him when they did that last year. They were hoping to maybe build him up by sticking him behind Rodgers this year. The team has success. They can build up his confidence. I think by week 7, week 8, another quarterback will be playing for the Jets, and he might not even be on the Jets right now.
Yeah. I mean, the Jets are kind of, I don't know though. It's like, should the Jets really, they've already sold out for Rodgers. Should they go? I mean, it's not like they're like a 3-time defending Super Bowl champion trying to win one more. I mean, it just seems kind of like if they're forcing the issue, they seem like they got a nice young core there with Quinnen Williams and Sauce and Garrett
Bryce
Wilson.
Huff and Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald.
Yeah, they've got some guys, They got a great defensive coach, likable guy. They got some bullets. Do you really want to just empty the clip on this year and have nothing? Because, I mean, they already have lost a ton of picks in the Rodgers deal, didn't they? Though I think one of those picks was conditional and a first became a second.
Mm-hmm.
So they gained back, I guess, half a round there. So that's a good one. But I don't know. I mean, I just think that I don't know. I mean, are the Jets like the Jets?
The question
were a
is
Super Bowl contender. I really believed with Rodgers. But if you take Rodgers out of the equation, should you really be in kind of like a Super Bowl win mode? Really? I don't know. I mean, I think they're good, but I don't think they're better than Kansas City or Buffalo or Baltimore. So
that's premature, though.
Maybe the fourth.
That's premature, right? Because we don't know how good that defense is yet. And that defense just won that game for them at home.
Yeah.
With them being scared basically to throw the ball in the fourth quarter and overtime with Zach Wilson. And so the defense is legit. And if we get to week 4, week 5, and the defense is what DJ Reed described, which is the 85 Bears or the 2000 Ravens. Now, it sounds extreme, but they have a special defense in terms of personnel. They have 8 legitimate defensive linemen. It's like 2019 Niners. They don't have that front 4, but in terms of the names of pass rushers and guys that rush the passer, they really have that. Quinnen Williams might be the best defensive tackle in the sport of football. He is an unbelievably good football player. Their linebackers are good. Their secondary is excellent. Like, if that defense is really, really good, they might have to plunge just because, hey, this might be the year with that defense. You know what I mean? I think it's that kind of a situation where you could be right, Krug, but I don't think we'll know until week 4 or week 5 because they might be in a situation where their defense is so historic that if they just waste it this year, they'll be like the 2017 Jaguars with Blake Bortles playing for them at quarterback.
But I mean,
That's
look how
kinda
much
what this is with Zach Wilson.
we know a lot about football, right? Collectively, and
Mhm.
we know that we just talked about offensive line being so important, and like the Jets O line is, I think, just is it a championship caliber O line? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, with Rodgers, it was all you could see it all coming together, but man, you take him out of the equation, my goodness. I don't know.
That's why I think Kirk Cousins is the perfect answer, man. I really do. Because the Vikings, it gives them a chance to fight for that number 1 pick. You get a draft pick in return, even if it's like a 3rd rounder. Kirk Cousins is there for 1 year, and you know he's going to be a free agent after the end of the year. So the Jets will likely get a compensatory pick back. Well, actually, I don't know. I think he's been in the league too long. Maybe not. But either way,
he's out of the formula. You're right.
Yeah, either way, you get him for 1 year, you assess it, you hope that Aaron Rodgers comes back, and if he does, Zach Wilson at this point, if he plays this year, he's probably going to write himself out of the equation to be the backup. So you would have a different backup anyways. And if he doesn't, then you look at Kirk Cousins and say, "Hey, we liked having you here. We think we can be competitive with you. We think we have a top tier defense. We also have the great receivers here. We'll go get another alignment or two. We can build around you if Aaron Rodgers retires." I really think that that's a legitimate move that they could make, and it makes a lot of sense, I think, both for the Vikings and for the Jets. So,
and they tried to give him that fully guaranteed contract when Minnesota gave him originally the fully guaranteed 3-year contract in free agency. The Jets went after him hard, and then I think they ended up taking Sam Darnold that year in the draft anyway. But they had the 6th pick, so it was kind of a weird situation, and they did pursue Kirk Cousins. So I do think that's a good point. But the more and more I think about it, to me, the Jets with Zach Wilson are the 2017 Jaguars. Nate Hackett is the offensive coordinator again. I think they can run the football with Breece Hall the way that team could with Leonard Fournette. I think the defense is just as special and has as many badasses as that defense had as well. I mean, you got the corner duo of DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner, which is reminiscent of a young Jalen Ramsey and AJ Bouye. You have the pass rushers. I mean, that defense had Yannick Ngakoue and Dante Fowler. I think who was the interior? Was Calais Campbell on that interior defensive line?
I don't think so. Not yet.
Who was the
who?
All right, I'm blanking
Ravens?
on. No,
the Jaguars.
Jaguars in 2017. Yeah. They had a strong interior defensive line. They had a young Miles Jack.
They had
Telvin
Marcus
Smith.
Stroud, I think. Remember Marcus Stroud from Georgia?
Was he still
Telvin
around?
Smith?
Maybe not.
I don't
Maybe
know.
I'm confusing my
Marcus
years.
Stroud might have been a while ago, Krug.
Yeah, Stroud was like, was he like Brunell days? I don't
That's like
know.
Dave Garrard, Fred Taylor times.
Yeah,
Maurice
yeah.
Jones-Drew, the guy you're interviewing tomorrow.
We're confusing eras at this point. Hey, I got one question I got to ask you guys because I wrote this down. I'm like, I got to ask these guys. I was asked on the radio this afternoon when I jumped on with Willard and Dibbs on 95.7. They said, who would you rather have? I forget exactly how they phrased it, but they basically asked the question that always gets asked when the Niners play the Rams, which is, who would you rather have, McVay or Shanahan? And I said that, when they were both free agents, I said that I would rather have McVay back then. Like originally, I was a McVay guy because I knew John McVay and I really like Sean McVay. So I'm like, yeah, McVay. They went with Shanahan. Now looking at it, I would say, like if it was going forward, I would rather have Shanahan than McVay because I kind of think McVay is going to coach for a few more years and kind of duck out. I kind of think Shanahan, if you have the right guy, you could have a longer run. So that's basically how I would evaluate it. But I originally wanted McVay, and I do think they're two of the best, I don't know, whatever, top 5 or 6 coaches in football. Where would you guys weigh in on McVay versus Shanahan?
Jesse.
I mean, I'm actually the opposite. I was when Shanahan was going to become available, it was like, that's the guy, go get him. And so I think that was the right move for me anyways at the time. And And Shanahan's still a hell of a coach. I mean, we're splitting hairs. Like you said, they're both top 6 guys. I had Shanahan, I think 7 in my rankings, and McVay 5 when I did them earlier this offseason. So I think it's close, but
So you have McVay over Shanahan, despite
right
the
now,
fact
I
that
mean, just right
Shanahan has
now,
owned
yeah. I mean, he's
McVay.
got a ring. He's got a
Right,
ring, and
okay.
it's recent. He's
fair.
got a ring, and it's recent. I mean, we can say what we
He's been
want,
to
but
2.
it's about winning Super Bowls, and that's the difference for me. I'm not necessarily saying that he's a for sure a better coach. I really do think it's close, but one has a ring and one doesn't. And I mean, that's the difference. I think it's that simple.
Yeah, I think they're both at the top of the league when it comes to coaches. I think there's a lot of people who believe McVay is overrated. I find that conversation to be somewhat unserious. I don't think there's anything overrated about McVay. I think he's an excellent coach. I think people are just sensitive to the idea that he could be a better coach than Shanahan. I think it very much comes down to preference. I think Shanahan is the better game planner. I think he has the more creative offense. I think his ideas are more innovative offensively than McVay's, but I do think McVay does a little better job of managing the entire game at times than Shanahan, and specifically managing his offense situationally, at least thus far in their head coaching career. To me, it honestly comes down to what your organizational structure is, because McVay is in a different situation with Shanahan, where he kind of was hired by Les Snead and he answers to Les Snead. So McVay very much plays the role of the coach, where Shanahan is the mastermind behind the entire 49ers situation. And when you listen to him talk, it sounds like there's no way he was going to take a job that he didn't have the control that the 49ers were able to cede to him. And so that's where I think it kind of comes down to what situation you're in. And I know that's somewhat of a cop-out answer, but I think that's the real answer, to be honest, because I don't know that Shanahan necessarily works perfect in the situation where McVay got into, where you have to turn a quarterback around immediately. You have a lot of talent on the roster and you were expected to win. And he did do it, but there were also expectations and he had to do it immediately and set his system and all of that clearly. Shanahan wants to go through the entire infrastructure of the roster and be in control of how you scout, and he wants to be in control of how you draft. All those things are philosophically derived from his ideas. So again, it really comes down to where you are organizationally. But to me, we're talking about 2 of the 4, 5, 6 best coaches in the NFL. Definitely the 2 best young ones. Though Mike McDaniel looks pretty good. That offense looks really creative.
I want to address Randall's comment here. He says, you guys have to pick Sean because he bought his ring. Y'all picked Tomlin for that Super Bowl years ago. Of course, 0 playoff wins in 6 years. I understand where you're coming from, Randall, but to me, the fact that Kyle Shanahan is even in the conversation without a ring should show you kind of the admiration that we have for him. If he gets a ring, you catapult him to probably top 3 past the McVays, the Tomlins, whoever else that you may have in that range. So he's got to get the ring. If he gets the ring, then we're probably talking about a top 3 coach. Without the ring, the fact that it's like even, do you take him over a Harbaugh or do you not? Do you take him over a Carroll or do you not? The fact that he's even in the conversation with those guys, and to me, in a tier separated from most other guys in the league, should show you the admiration that we have. But unfortunately, when we've had these conversations for the last 2 weeks, we are talking about 2 other guys that are in the upper echelon of coaches.
Also, to add to this, how can we say the ring? Like, of course the ring matters. Give me a non-ring argument on why Brady's ahead of Manning. Give me a non-ring argument on why Brady's ahead of Rodgers. You won't make it. The first thing you say on why he's better than those guys is the 6 Super Bowl rings, and one has 2, one has 1, right? Mm-hmm. So in sports conversation, when we talk about this, right, why do people not put Dan Marino in the top 5 quarterbacks of all time? The guy threw for 5,000 yards in an era where throwing for 4,000 yards was unheard of.
Joe Montana says he's the best ever.
Right, but it's simply because he didn't have that silverware. So to pretend like this ring doesn't matter, of course it matters when we're talking about the legacy of all these people, because we've literally put such a great emphasis on it. And so, yeah, I do think it is relevant in this conversation because McVay did ultimately achieve the ultimate goal that Shanahan hopefully achieves this year.
Well, and there, I hear what Randall's saying when he says that the Rams bought their ring, but it wasn't Sean McVay. I mean, that's the take it up with Kroenke. I mean, that's like, hey, that decision's made way over my head. Hey, I just work here. In that situation, Sean does just work there. I mean, he can't control that. He happened to be the head coach of a owner that was desperate to regain the LA market, had leveraged himself billions by building the SoFi building and needed to kind of re-identify with the fans in LA for the long-term viability of the franchise, right? I mean, heck, there's going to be 70% Niner fans in that building on Sunday. So they've got a lot of work to do as far as building a fan base, but Kroenke went all in on doing that.
What do you mean by buying a ring, though? The Niners have spent how much money in free agency?
I don't know.
They just spent how much money on Javon Hargrave.
I know, and also,
every team that spends money doesn't win a ring either.
Right. Well, and also you can't buy a ring.
Namdi Asamoah Eagles.
Right. I mean, you could argue Eddie D and the Niners in '94 tried to buy a ring, but it really wasn't. They just got so many guys to come to their place for cheap because they had been great for so long up to that point. But I mean, it's like it's a cap sport. So I mean, everybody's got the same amount of money to spend. What's the right amount of cap room to spend? I don't know, whatever helps you win. I mean, it's theoretically, I think you should probably try to spend every penny and get the best team you possibly can. There'll be teams that will roll over a lot of cap room and stay 10, 12, 15 million beneath the cap. And I think that's not very competitive. I'd like to see the 49ers, who just established like $40 million of cap room, dip into that cap room to either extend Ayuk and those guys, or to add to the mix, or hopefully both.
Well, we're acting like a ring doesn't mean anything. I see a comment, one ring ain't squat. What if I gave the 49ers a ring in 2019? You saying that ain't squat? What if they won it in 2012? That ain't squat? Give us one ring in the last 10 years. I bet you think it means a lot. I bet you think it means a lot then.
I think this is a really good question that we should take before we go. It was asked to me, but hypothetically, I'm going to ask it to the two of you. Hypothetically, you can upgrade one thing, right tackle or right guard. Which way are you going?
Tackle.
Krueger? I meant to call him Krueg. I just hit him with a Krueger.
Krueger.
Yeah. I would definitely go with the right tackle. I love Colton as a guy, but you know what? Colton is ideal on a championship team, in my opinion. Even though I think Colton's going to have a decent year. On a championship team, I think he would be your sixth O lineman that can literally play center, guard, tackle at any point. And if you really, to me, they're one lineman shy of a championship line. And nothing against him, because I don't think he's always to the weak spot. Some days it's going to be Brendel. Some days it's going to be Banks. Some days it's going to be Burford. They're all, only Trent is just, an O-line god. The rest of these guys are good, but getting better in some cases, but not special and can be fallible. But not to put it all on Colton, but I think if you had one more really strong offensive tackle, I think they'd be a really dangerous team.
Yeah, so I agree with your point on Colton McKivitz being like the perfect sixth offensive lineman on a team. I think he is perfect in that role. To me, this is a no-brainer. It's tackle for three reasons. One, it's the more valuable position. Two, it's harder to find a great special right tackle than it is to find a right guard. There's a reason why, you draft Lane Johnson in the top 5 picks of the draft, because you don't find people like that big, that move like that. And then finally, 3, from a schematic standpoint, if you have a right tackle that can hold his own in pass protection or in the run game, look at what Trent Williams does for the 49ers and how they're able to protect their interior offensive line. Right guard, having a Zach Martin is helpful, but it's a lot easier to scheme around and do a lot of different things in both your pass and run game when you have 2 excellent tackles versus if you have a great tackle and a great right guard. And so to me, this is tackle no-brainer.
Yeah, for sure.
Randall is coming back.
Oh, I was waiting. I was waiting for this comment, Randall. I got something for you.
Enough said. Here we go, Jessie Naylor. Floor is yours.
No, first
He's
of
got
all,
a ring,
Randall,
man.
Randall
He's got a
knows.
ring. He's one of the great coaches of all time.
Randall knows I appreciate him. I just brought out his comment because first of all, it was all caps. How could you miss it? And second of all, I think it's a good topic that I think a lot of 49er fans feel the way that you do, Randall. And I think it's fair. But that being said, getting a ring doesn't necessarily make you a great coach. But let's look at the coaches that we've talked about the last 2 weeks. Tomlin has a ring. He's been coaching for like 15 years, never had a losing season, and has been to the Super Bowl in another stint of his. Then let's look at McVay, who's been a head coach for the exact length that Kyle Shanahan has. He's also been to 2 Super Bowls and beat Shanahan head to head to get that ring, essentially. He beat him in the NFC Championship to then go on and eventually get that ring. So that's what we're talking about. If you had a coach that just came in, took over a great team and won, and then was flushed out of the league, I'm not saying that guy's better than Shanahan, but when you look at players historically or coaches historically, and you have a tiebreaker because 2 guys are relatively even, the tiebreaker is always the ring. It always has been, and it always will be. When you look at Dan Marino and John Elway, most people will go Elway because of the rings. That's the tiebreaker. And that's just the way that the league works. That's the way it's always worked.
If you guys owned a team, Shanahan,
This is pretty funny.
Shanahan or McVay?
I'm gonna ask you first, Shanahan. Or
What did he
McVay?
say? I didn't read it. I didn't get to read it. What did he say?
He said technically rings don't mean anything to us because none of us are getting it. He's absolutely right.
That's true.
Yeah.
They
You
should
first,
mean
Chris.
they
You
should mean
first.
everything to you.
No, you first because we always ask you questions like this. I've noticed a pattern. We always ask you questions like this, and you never give us a direct answer. Then
I
you
always
put us
give
on the
direct
spot, and then you go on other shows and say, Vish and Jessie said blah, blah, blah. So, Krug, you were an owner.
You're an
owner.
trashing. I trashed you so bad last night, Vish. No.
You amplified my points.
Anyway. You own in this hypothetical, you own an NFL team. There's only 2 coaches you can hire. Shanahan or McVay.
You first.
Yeah, what's the answer? You tell us,
first.
Larry, then we'll tell you.
I'm going to go Shanahan because I really think that one of the things that matters is that I want my coach to be like there for a while. And I just get the feeling that he's more of a lifer. Now, they're both young men right now, but I'm just saying, I think McVay's coaching tenure is going to end in 3 years. And I think he's going to go right into the sunset. I think they're comparable, though. Like, if I didn't have Shanahan, I'd want McVay. If I didn't have McVay, I'd want Shanahan. I think they're comparable. I think I would go with Shanahan.
Okay, what if you knew McVay was going to coach for 10 more years? Would that change your answer?
Yeah, it would. I would go with McVay. I said I wanted McVay initially. I like McVay's. I think who was it? Was it you, Jessie, that said the handling of the game, or was it you, Vish?
I said that.
It was. Yeah.
I like the aggressiveness that he calls a game when his team's on top of their game. But it's hard to get beyond the fact that Shanahan in the head-to-head recently has had ownage. And unless McVay starts winning a couple of these head-to-head matchups, you know what I mean? How do you not?
Unless it's the most important game other than the Super Bowl that he does, yeah.
Right.
But rings don't mean anything. So, I mean, what are we talking about?
So,
all I know is that.
Me.
Well, I just want to say this. I'm going to actually let you answer first, but
I see how
you were going to say no, hold on. I'm going to give a real answer. I already gave a real answer. We already know what my answer is going to be, but Vish, not only does Larry not give an answer and then go talk about our answers on other shows, but then he assigns me an answer that I didn't even give on other shows.
Jessie and Vish were both picking Pickett over Purdy, Grant.
So full of shit. And the best part of this is that I had so many. I had so many comments in my post game that was like, "Didn't you pick Pickett over Purdy, and didn't you pick the 49ers to lose? I'm like, actually, neither of those things. So what the hell? Where is this coming
Damn.
from?
It's funny because
I'm
I didn't get
polluting the
hate.
audience with incorrect information.
And
love
you
it.
did in some way that it's funny that he got that because I didn't get the hate I nearly deserved after what happened on Sunday. I'll tell you that. People were pretty nice to me. And I
Yeah, it was
appreciate
actually
people for
you that
being
picked
nice.
against them.
You
But
were the
yeah, I
guy.
picked against
You
them
were
and
the
I said
Pickett.
that. So yeah,
You were the
I
Pickett.
should have been the one getting the hate.
I'm going to make a T-shirt with a picture of your face, and it's going to say "Pickett over Purdy, 2023." Vish. It's going to
All
be
right,
a
let me
hot selling
answer-
shirt. It's going to be a hot selling
Well,
shirt.
it's Derek Clausen now.
$35.95.
Derek Clausen's the one taking it because he put it on 33rd team and that quarterback rankings. I saw even you tweeted about it. So let me answer this question. Okay, I'll fully admit I'm biased. I'd take Shanahan. And it comes down to one simple thing.
You
He
hope
is
to be
the
invited
origi-
to training camp next year?
No.
Okay.
He's the originator of the scheme. He is the mastermind. Everybody's from the tree is his disciple. And with that, I know that his offense will never be caught up because it's his offense. And he's always going to keep it evolving. And with McVay, there's been times where where is the adjustment coming? Where's the adjustment coming? And he gets into the lab over the offseason and he comes to an adjustment, but he doesn't do it as fast as Shanahan. I don't think he's as creative a run game coordinator as Shanahan. And to me, for that, when we're talking about the coaches, and perhaps I'm looking only from an X's and O's standpoint and not giving enough credence to game management, managing of people, hiring coaches, they both do an excellent job of all of those type of things. And maybe I'm looking too far into it. I'll admit I'm biased, but I'll take Shanahan simply because of that. Yeah.
No, I agree. Actually, I agree with everything that you said. I think schematically, Shanahan is much better than McVay overall. I really do believe that. But as my head coach, I really want a guy who's a leader of men, and that is McVay. I think he clears Shanahan there, or has up to this point, and I think Shanahan schematically clears McVay and has to this point. Now, we started off the show talking about something that I saw from Shanahan that is kind of giving me room for pause, that maybe, just maybe, Shanahan is turning that around. And if Shanahan is starting to figure out maybe some weaknesses in his leadership style and is willing to push himself to go outside of his comfort zone and do some of those things that I'm talking about, then I think that he can overcome McVay even without a ring. I think that's a possibility. But right now, I've seen it with the track record of McVay. I think McVay is the better leader of men, and that's why I would go with him.
At least you gave a definitive answer, not like, oh, I think McVay is not going to be there, so Shanahan, but, oh, if McVay is there, I'll go with McVay.
Yeah, but we did get him to say McVay if all is even. And Jimbo says Kyle.
If everything's even, I'm going to go with my original take, which is that McVay would be the better coach.
You like the hair or the beard? What is it that's got
I think McVay is kind of has a little bit of the Jimmy Johnson cutthroat, where he'll get rid of anybody. I mean, he just threw Goff to the curb because he didn't think he was good enough. And he's got a little bit of that, I think they're both kind of, I think Kyle's a nicer guy. I think Kyle's at their core, I think Kyle's a nicer guy than McVay. But McVay's got that coldness that I think is elite when it comes to, running a football team. You have to kind of be very direct, and you have to sometimes say goodbye. You got to be really decisive in personnel. Look what the Rams did to get that title. I mean, they went and got Ramsey. They went and got Von Miller. They went and got Stafford. They went and got OBJ. They went, they were really proactive, and a lot of that's Les Snead. But I think that also I think the aggressiveness that they had in the front office, also they were that aggressive on the field.
Jimbo says Kyle beats him every time. Hello. And then followed it up with McVay had one good team. False and false.
Yeah,
the every time except for asterisk, the most important time. And he's been to the Super Bowl twice with two different quarterbacks in 5 years. Or 7
and the Niners
years,
have been favored in almost all those games. I mean, there's a few they haven't been, but most of them they have been.
And those
you know what I think's interesting, guys?
Some people wait. By the way, also before you go, I want to add that those coaching head-to-heads can be funky. Sometimes certain coaches have certain coaches' numbers. Like Rex Ryan's teams used to give Bill Belichick's teams problems all the time. Does that make Rex Ryan a better coach than Bill Belichick?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say this, though. I think the rivalry between these guys is so real that when the Niners came out on that, was it that Thursday night game where they ran it 18 times in a row or whatever it was, and they just ran it down their throat in the first drive and out physicaled the Rams and just gutted them. Since that point, then the next game,
No, that was
Niners,
Monday night. That was Monday night, Krug.
was Monday night.
Yeah.
Then the next time the teams played, the Rams came out, and even though they really played a good game and they had all kinds of weapons, they decided it was going to be a referendum about toughness and tried to run the ball way more than they should have, considering they didn't have any good runners, and the Niners beat them. And only that third time in the championship game did they finally, get enough physical, and they added Weddle, and they made some, they just won that game. They did more. They got that game at home and they won that game. So you credit them. But to me, the interesting thing is just that how, since the Niners kind of punched them in the mouth, McVay has almost changed his style of how he wants to play. Now he wants to be that. I mean, that's what they did this last week against Seattle. They just punched them in the mouth, ran it on them, and committed to the run, shorten the game, dominate the time of possession. In some ways, I feel like McVay has become more like Shanahan since that 18-play drive game.
No, you're absolutely right, because it goes back to the original conversation, right? The Rams' strength always under McVay is they've had high team speed. And the Niners match that speed. They're one of the fastest football teams, but they do it in a much bigger package. They're just a bigger and more physical team than the Rams. And every time that matchup would just come down to the fact that the Niners physically just imposed their will on the Rams. That's what ended up happening. And you could see that really frustrated McVay. And you're absolutely right, Krug. In that 2021 season, it was almost like they wanted to show that they won't get bullied by the Niners. And they even got bullied in the NFC Championship game. They had a long, 18-run drive or whatever that ended in, I think, a Juwan Jennings touchdown, even in the NFC.
I mean, go look at the numbers, guys. I mean, in that second game, they threw 7 times or something to Cooper Kupp. The Niners didn't defend any of them, and he caught all 7 balls, and they were like all uncontested. And yet the Rams went away from him because they were trying to show how tough they were. By the time the NFC Championship rolled around and the money was on the table, Stafford was, of course, going to Cooper Kupp, and of course, the Niners had never defended him and didn't in that game either. And with the money on the table, Stafford went right down the field to Cooper Kupp when everybody in the building knew that was his guy, including the Niners. They couldn't stop it. So
you're right. By the way, Steve Wilkes is 2-0 against Kyle Shanahan head-to-head with Josh Rosen as his quarterback, if we're doing coaching head-to-heads right now.
Well, hold on, though, also. So when we talk about McVay and the Rams, they were very similar to the 49ers in the way that they dominated in the run game. But then they played New England in the Super Bowl. New England stifled them with that front. Gurley turned into a shell of himself. And so he's the one that pioneered the 3 wide receivers on basically every snap.
Right.
Then he ran that into a Super Bowl, won a Super Bowl, and now he's going back to the run game. So he's kind of shown that he can get to the Super Bowl with 2 completely different styles.
Yeah, and by the way, the 2 teams that they went to the Super Bowl with were very, very different. The team that they went in 2018 had a very good and powerful offensive line. Roger Saffold was a good guard. Andrew Whitworth was very, very good. Ron Havenstein played tackle for them for a while. Their defense was with Wade Phillips at the time. It was Aqib Talib, Marcus Peters. They had John Johnson III, Corey Littleton, Dante Fowler. Go look at the team in 2021. Completely different football team on both offense and defense. No more Gurley. It was Cam Akers. Cooper Kupp was the star. In 2018, he didn't even play in the Super Bowl. Brandon Cooks was gone. Robert Woods was hurt in 2021. The offensive line was very, very different. Brian Allen was the center. They still had Whitworth, still had Havenstein. Saffold was gone, never replaced him. I think David Edwards and Austin Blythe were the starting guards in the Super Bowl. And then the defense. One, they made a big schematic change by getting rid of Wade Phillips and hiring Brandon Staley and then continuing what he started with Raheem Morris. And then 2, you're right. They had like Eric Weddle, Jalen Ramsey, the second Darius Williams, Ernest Jones. So yeah, it was a different football team.
And you remember better than I do on these things, Vish, but correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't it during that run to the Super Bowl that Gurley really actually did fall apart? It was like towards the tail end of that season.
Remember? CJ Anderson had the huge finish to the year.
That's what
he
I
had
thought.
the big playoff game versus Dallas. That was all that year. Yep.
So you had a team that was built around the run with an elite running back. That running back turns into a shell of himself on the way into the playoffs. They then take CJ Anderson off the street, ride him to a Super Bowl, still got to the Super Bowl, and lost to Tom Brady.
We do got to mention how they got to the Super Bowl, though.
That's I get it. It was I totally understand that. But then once they got there, they lost to what? Arguably the greatest coach of all time.
Well, you know what happened was,
but the greatest quarterback of all time.
The Rams' offense got held to 3 points, didn't they? Didn't they lose that?
Right, and that a big part of that is not having Gurley healthy.
Yeah, I mean that was like Belichick's.
I agree, but when Gurley was healthy, the first time that 6-1 front was introduced, when Fangio and the Bears did it to him, and they made Goff's life all kind of hell.
Mm-hmm.
And the big thing with that Super Bowl was New England played a lot of zero coverage that entire season because Stephon Gilmore won the Defensive Player of the Year. They played so much zero because they were so good in man coverage. And then they played quarters and quarter, half, and played like a Fangio defense for the entirety of the Super Bowl until they go zero on the play, actually, that Stephon Gilmore gets the game-clinching interception. And so they got completely outclassed in terms of the game plan and all of that. But credit to McVay for bouncing back, making the wholesale changes, and finding a way to win a Super Bowl. Kyle is looking to do the same, recovering from a Super Bowl loss. And unlike McVay, he's got a real chance to do that this year.
Mr. Bacon, Egg, and Cheese Croissant said, where's your 15 pieces of swag? It's 15 pieces of flair, right? From Office Space. That's a good pullback right there. I like that.
I love Jennifer Aniston. Jennifer Aniston said, I don't like talking about my flair.
Yeah.
Larry, I cut you off there because Jesse started laughing. Last point, and then I think we'll call it a show. What did you have to say?
God, who knows?
He's still thinking about his bets.
I don't know. I've lost cash. I'm just very down in the dumps right now. No,
it's okay. Krug.
No, I was just going to say that, I think that the Shanahan McVay thing is so interesting from the standpoint that I really think there's mutual respect there. You got two young coaches that coach on the same staff, and they're both, but I'll tell you, the one thing that's clear is like, you look at the pictures of Shanahan when he took that job and his, way he looks now, it's like the guy's aged like 20 years on this job. It's
a presidential run.
He went from looking like a young, like lively coach to looking like his dad.
It's just the profession just beats the hell out of you, but they're two really good coaches. And I can't wait for this one because I think this is going to be, it sets up, of course, 49ers are the better team, but it's kind of sets up for the Rams to play well. I mean, they're at home. It's early in the year. They're not a very deep team, but it doesn't matter. It's only week 2, right? They haven't suffered any real injuries, and Stafford's feeling good, and he's got some weapons. So we'll see. It'll be entertaining because to me, what's so entertaining is that the 49ers have become this road traveling circus now with their fans, where everywhere they go, they have tons of fans who travel, and it's probably as good as almost anybody in the league. And to me, the most astonishing thing was not that the Niners beat the Steelers or even by that spread, was the fact that in Heinz Field in the fourth quarter, through the TV, you could hear a loud and distinct "Let's go Niners."
I heard Jesse's voice specifically.
That was
I lost it.
Unbelievable. To me, that was in some ways the most astonishing part of week 1 because
and Jimbo
Steelers fans. Were you there? You were there, right?
I was there, dude. It was incredible. Steelers fans, by the way, were awesome. I just wanted to address Jimbo one last time because Jimbo, yes, you're right. The one that says if Kyle gets a ring, it's over. Yeah, we said that. You might have come to the conversation a little bit late, but we absolutely agree with that. And I said the fact that Kyle's even in the conversation with these guys right now without a ring shows how much we admire Kyle. If he gets a ring, he immediately catapults probably into that top 3 range above all the guys that we've talked about the last couple of weeks.
He's in the best coach range.
That type of stuff. Yeah,
He's
for
in the
sure.
best coach range if he wins a ring, especially because if he wins a ring,
Yeah.
he'll be doing it with the less heralded quarterback than what any of
Yeah.
these guys are
I
doing it
don't
with.
think I would put him above Andy Reid. Yeah,
I'm
but
just
yeah,
I'm not saying that you would. I'm just saying
Yeah.
that there will be people that will do that if he gets a ring.
That's
If he's
fair.
already so
That's
high
fair.
without it. But
That's
guys,
true.
that's the show. Thank you everybody for joining. Please like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe to Last Second Sports and the Krueg Show as well. Next week, this show will be a post-game reaction, I think. What's up, Jesse?
Oh, I was saying it's going back around to Larry's.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's going. We'll see on the
We'll
timing
see about
for
that,
Jesse.
yeah.
The timing for Jesse is a little bit hard with the Eastern time zone. I did say to Krug that next week I will be there to do this show as a post game. So we'll keep you guys in the loop. But next week, this show will be traveling to the Krug Show. I'm sure all of you are already liked and subscribed. Pig in a Pickle, if anybody was wondering, that's where the Krug Show is, Pig in a Pickle. So make sure you join there. Last Second Sports will be hosting the show the week after that. Make sure you're liked and subscribed to Jesse, and then we'll be back here the following week after that. Remember, it's Krug, Jesse, then me. You know where to find this show. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Like, subscribe to everybody. We'll see you next time.